will make sure that I'll be happy to.
You need to sign this. That's the signatures for the diplomas. Hi, Matt.
We're live.
Hold on. Okay. I just realized the setup tonight and everything else. I'm like, I don't think so. And he didn't, so.
Okay, I think what you gave me was great.
Yeah.
The only
Or you
thing
can do like I did before, just spell my name.
programmatic budget.
Get that spell my name. Yeah, already enrolled.
Okay, we're streaming, right?
We're streaming this out of it, and
We're streaming.
but I have
Okay,
We
excellent.
are recording.
All right. I'd like to call to order the meeting of the Hopkinton School Board on Thursday, November 15th, 2018 at 5:33 p.m. If we could rise and give our pledge of allegiance, please. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Great, thank you very much. And thank you all for coming tonight. I hope you enjoyed your tour this evening. I hope there were snacks on board and all that good stuff. And thank you for taking them on the tour tonight. Any additions or deletions to the agenda tonight, Steve?
We do have a revised agenda. Respectfully asking that we table the minutes. The copy that I sent was draft 1. We're now up to draft 3, and I'll have them ready for the next meeting. They're certainly ready if anybody would like the draft copy, but for formal approval, we'll wait. We also added, for Mr. O'Brien, a Budget Committee update, and then there are 2 action items for the board to accept donations from the PTA and from our former students. So those are
Thank you.
the updates.
Excellent. Any correspondence this evening?
Yes, we did have a correspondence from the Slusser Center asking if the Hopkinton School Board would be interested in adding a date to our senior lunch agenda. We do the summer and we do a March one, but there's openings on January 9th and January 30th. I don't know if you caught it in board notes, but if the board is interested, we can certainly facilitate that. But we have had a request for the Hopkinton School Board to take on an additional senior lunch. So you just have to let me know.
Excellent. I think that'd be a great idea. How about you guys all agree with one of those 2 dates?
Do you have a
Perfect.
preference?
Either one works for me if you want to double check schedules, everyone, and just give Donna a confirmation of one of those 2 dates. How's that sound?
We have to talk menu. We do burgers and dogs, and we do ham. We can do burgers and dogs, I suppose, in January. Right?
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, let me know, but yeah.
Okay,
Check your
sounds great.
calendars, but it's either the 9th or the 30th.
Yep, that sounds great. Excellent. As Steve mentioned, we have the approval of the minutes will be tabled to the next meeting when we have the final draft. At this point, we have our first opportunity for public comment. We thank you and welcome all of you here tonight. We haven't met in Harold Martin since I joined the board
Wow.
11 years ago.
Good.
So it's different to be sitting in Harold Martin than in our usual meetings. So if I seem a little disjointed, it's because I'm not used to this routine. But at this point, if there's anybody here with us this evening who'd like to stand up and provide some input to the board, as you know, we'll be giving a presentation on the Facilities Committee coming up. And there will be another opportunity for public comment at the end of the meeting if you wish to wait. So does anybody have anything they'd like to provide the board at this point? All set? Great, thank you. We'll keep rolling. As I said, you'll have another opportunity at the end of the meeting. At this point, comments from the Hopkinton School Board. Sam, would you like to start this evening?
I'd just like to thank Dave Luno for coming last night to the high school's National Honor Society induction. It went really smooth and it was great to see a lot of new members. I think that it's going to be a really good year.
Excellent, that's great. Thank you. Jim?
Sure, and so I get a couple, one has to do with the facility project, and so we might get to it later. But I know I've received requests around financials, and I know the board has received some additional information from Harriman with some additional financial information. So I guess my request would be that once we receive that information, we should post it on our website so that the community all has it. So I would just make the recommendation that whatever the school board has in terms of financial information or any sort of planning, that we make that available to the public, because I'm getting a lot of incoming, and we have a pretty good crowd here tonight that I think are looking for more financial information. So if we have it, I think that the public should have access to it.
Okay, great, thank you.
And then the second question I had asked in an email, and then I saw we had updated the website with some steering committee meeting minutes, and I'm just curious if that's all the information that we have, or all the work that the steering committee had done is what's reflected on the website, or is there more coming, or?
The 2 meetings that are on there are the 2 in the 2018. If we'd like to go back and have every historical piece on there, I would just like to talk to Jay. I'm happy to do it. But there is, once the request was made for this year's, I just thought might as well put it up for the entire community.
Okay, so all of this year's information is out
That's
there.
correct.
So, okay, that's great. And then the third one is, I know at our last meeting, we went through some of the, I forget, it's a New England School Development Council, the projected enrollment for the future. And I think when we talked about it, we said that, I know we had it in our packet, and we said that it would be available to the public as well. I shared that with the budget committee last night, but again, I think if we could post that.
Yeah, okay, if
It could
that's
be on
not
the
up.
facility page or somewhere else, just so
Yeah.
that it's available. It's interesting information. I think
Yeah.
it helps.
Thank you. The intent is to have that up.
Okay, so I'll just pass it back to put up as well.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Matt?
Three things, just to congratulate the fall athletes, a pretty successful season, for sure. Also congratulate all the students and faculty and staff for the end of the first semester. I had some folks approach me at work, actually, to say that they just dropped their child off for honors breakfast at the high school, which I didn't know that we did, but the community member commented that it's such an awesome thing that we do. So to those folks, thank you. And also, I thought that parent-teacher conferences went extremely well. So I wanted to thank the community for their involvement in that, and the faculty. I know that some of the teachers were here from 7 a.m. until 8 p.m. So I know that's a long day, but a very important day. So just want to thank them as well.
Okay.
Great. Thanks, Liz. Thank you, Sam. I was really delighted to be invited to speak at the Honor Society induction last night. It was a lovely ceremony, and I think it's great to see so many students being recognized. But it doesn't stop there. I mean, students get recognized for all sorts of things that they do and activities and how they participate in the Hopkinton School District. But my congratulations to the folks last night. The other thing, and I'll just talk a little bit more about this, I think, as we go through the legislative session. But obviously, everybody knows now that there's sort of like a change of leadership that's coming about in Concord. And I think with that is really a strong renewed commitment to provide more state support for public school funding, for public school building aid, and as those bills get heard and provide opportunity for public testimony, I hope people from Hopkinton, people from this community, will take advantage of the fact that we live less than 10 miles from the State House. And a lot of the reason why there's such strong, I don't want to say pushback, but scrutiny on things in Hopkinton is because we do have a high tax rate, and we do have a high tax rate because we have a very low equalized valuation per pupil. What that really means to say is that there's a lot of kids in this district. And Hopkinton really sort of bucks the trend on this, because other districts that are in the same situation are districts like Claremont and Allenstown and Berlin. And so a lot of people don't see a lot of similarity between Hopkinton and these districts from a lot of different standpoints. But from the ability to support public education, we do have those same struggles. So I certainly hope people from this community will take advantage of our proximity to Concord and show their interest in increased state support for public education.
Yeah, thank you very much. I'm all set tonight, and also just Aviva's out of town this evening, so she will be back at our next meeting. But at this point, I'd like to turn the meeting over to Steve for presentation and staff reports.
Sure, and I'd like to welcome Bonnie Christie. Bonnie, thanks for coming. It's great to see you again after our meeting today. Please, if you'd like to talk about the Contour to the Coast Choose to Reuse program.
Sure, thanks. Bonnie Christie. I'm here, I'm listed, I don't know if this is on, it's working.
As long as the green light's on, you're good.
Okay. I'm on the agenda, but I'm really here for the recycling committee, the town committee, not for myself. And probably most of you were at the polls on election day and got one of our Choose to Reuse bags. Is there anybody who didn't get one?
My wife got one. That counts.
Okay, that's one per household.
Okay.
So those bags are the beginning of a project that started with some Hopkinton school kids that we are, well, I'm feeling a little unorganized and overwhelmed tonight because it's a situation of, we've sort of created a monster. It's a good monster, but it's a case of be careful what you ask for, because we have had such overwhelming interest from the community in the reduction of plastics. And it really all came up through the school kids that we've got a project that's barreling down the road now, and we have no choice but to see it through for the benefit of the kids. I will just read to you, just to give you the overview of what the project is, and then there are a couple of things I wanted to present tonight. The project that we're doing is called Kentucook to the Coast, Choose to Reuse. The concept is to keep plastics out of the Kentucook River, which in turn keeps them out of the Merrimack River, which in turn keeps them out of the ocean. And we have a grant from the Merrimack Conservation Partnership that funds this. We also got money from Hopkinton Rotary and from the Town Conservation Commission. So when I was writing the grant, this is how I presented it. I started with a quote from Norman McLean from the book A River Runs Through It and Other Stories. Eventually all things merge into one and a river runs through it. The Kentucook River, which is a designated New Hampshire protected river, runs through the heart of Hopkinton. It flows for 71 miles from its headwaters in Rindge, New Hampshire, to the confluence with the Merrimack in Concord. The Merrimack continues through southern New Hampshire into Massachusetts, entering the Atlantic Ocean in Newburyport. The water that flows through Hopkinton is part of a vast riverine highway carrying anything dissolvable or transportable through two major watersheds before reaching the Atlantic. Everything that reaches the Atlantic becomes part of the marine ecosystem, which is home to millions of species of fish, plants, and microorganisms. Would you like to bring up the mural from the kids, Joella? Many people don't appreciate this ecological connection. Our education and outreach project will increase public awareness that, number one, Hopkinton lies within the watershed of the Merrimack, which is listed by the U.S. Forest Service as one of the nation's top endangered rivers. This was done by the Harold Martin kids. This is their vision of plastics and what the problem is.
In Maple Street.
Maple Street, sorry. Number two, rivers carry trash over long distances and connect nearly all land surfaces with the oceans. Through the Kentucook River, we have a direct impact on the Merrimack and the Atlantic. Number three, the choices we make in Hopkinton, such as what we are willing to do to prevent plastic bags from polluting the rivers, determine if that impact is positive or negative. And number four, the pollution of river and marine environments by plastics is massive and global. Every year, 8 million metric tons of plastic are added to the existing estimated 150 million metric tons in the ocean. Understanding how the plastic gets there is critical. And in the words of Hopkinton High School student Joshua Duvall, pollution from plastic bags and the effects they have on the environment is widespread. Not caring about your trash is not caring about another life. We are leaving a negative environmental footprint because of our trash in the ocean. Our town is small, but sometimes small steps begin big movements. So it was his letter to the select board last March. And this is one quote from that very well-written and very well-researched letter, was what inspired a couple of us in the recycling committee to do something about plastics. It wasn't the first time a student has spoken up. My nephew, who is a senior now, when he was in 4th grade, he did a great PowerPoint called Waste-Free Schools or something, and started a waste-free club. I don't know what happened to it, but that was a long time ago. We also had a contest where 3 students from the school system developed logos, and there were some bags that were printed by the Rotary, and their logos are on those bags, and I still see, that was, I don't know, maybe a decade or more ago, I still see these bags at the farmer's market and so forth. And then last year we get this letter from a freshman at the high school saying, you know, please do something. So, you know, so many times we say that the older generation passes the baton to the younger generation. But in this case, it's the younger generation which is trying very hard to pass the baton to us, and I feel like it's our job to accept that they can only do so much. And what can we do as decision makers and leaders in the community? So we've started with trying to get these reusable bags out into the community. The kids at the Between School and Home after school program here at Harold Martin started a project called Plastic Attack, and they did a lot of research on plastics. And if anybody didn't get a fact sheet at the elections last Tuesday, I have some here which has all their research on it. It's pretty devastating when you read it. They also came up with the idea of starting with something small, which would be to ban the use of plastic straws in all the Hopkinton schools. And Ginny, would you be able to bring up the poster that's right there? They started a petition, and they have a lot of signatures on it. And I said, is this petition going to go to the principal? And Joe Ellen said, well, no, actually, the principal already signed the petition. We want it to go straight to the superintendent. So.
Yeah, Bill.
I did.
Yeah, Bill.
I believe it.
Woo!
Well, I think maybe you did sign the petition. Anyway, so tonight I'm bringing the petition on behalf of the kids from Harold Martin and Maple Street School to start with considering getting rid of plastic straws. The other thing that I'm asking for tonight is, as you know, we've asked some people in the community to be what we're calling pledge leaders, to show leadership on this issue. Steve Chamberlain is one of our pledge leaders. Dave Luneau is one of them, and Jim O'Brien. Anybody else in here? We would like all of the school board to be pledge leaders if you would like to do so. So what that involves is, number one, doing stuff in your own personal life to reduce plastics, but just in the last couple of days, we've come up with a big ask, and we'd like to hear what you think about this. But there is an organization called PLAN, which is Post Landfill Action Network, and it was started by a student at UNH, and they work with college campuses to make them plastic-free, particularly working in the food service part of the schools. And we thought, what if Hopkinton were to take on the job of becoming the first public school system in New Hampshire to move towards being plastic-free? And if we did that, create a model that other school systems could use, what would it look like? And we thought, well, and I talked to Steve about it this morning, and I said, what if the school board put together a working group or a task force or a study group of some sort with students, people from the food service departments, waste management, teachers, whoever you guys think would be good to be on that group, and do a study about, well, what is the extent of plastic use in the school system? What things could we find alternatives for? How could we reduce the plastic use? What would the cost impacts be? And then come back to the school board in 6 months or in June or whatever with the results of this study and what's been found out and some suggestions. So that's what I'm putting to the school board tonight. Would the Hopkinton School District be interested in creating a working group to look into the idea of becoming a model for the state of New Hampshire to reduce plastics on our campuses?
Anybody have any questions for Bonnie at this point?
Would you be willing to chair it? Seriously.
Yeah.
I guess I would say yes.
Great.
If we had a really good working committee. I mean, we got over 200 people signing the pledge at our table on election day. So now I have a 200-plus email list. I'm like, oh my God, you know, you got this email list, then you need to do something with it. So it takes more than one person. I'd be more than happy to help organize and do whatever I can. But yeah.
That'd be great, yeah. And I think, I mean, first of all, I love your energy around this. I think it's fabulous, and you and I have emailed back and forth a few times on some things. I did see an email that you've been in touch with the founder of Plan,
Yes.
but he was out of town
Yes, Alex
during this,
Reed.
during
Yes.
this period of time. Would love to hear more about, because I think in that email he said he'd be happy to share some thoughts with you about how that might look. So I think that'd be really interesting to hear from him directly, since he's had so much experience maybe
Yes.
implementing some of these programs all over the sounds like the country.
I think he'd probably be happy to come and
Yeah, and also I think too, and it's sort of tailing on Dave's, on Dave's suggestion too, and that is if there are 200 people on that email list, I'd love to see at least 10 of them offering to step up and be part of that committee. Because that's 200 people strong right there that are for this idea, and I think
They're all
that's
saying they want to do something.
absolutely, and I think this really has to be a community effort. I think obviously the schools are the places where we have the most concentrated amount of energy that's happening with this. But I also think that, obviously it carries over to home and things like that, and to have people who are able to maybe drive there are a lot of pieces of that project that you mentioned in that vision, and have various people within our community be able to pick up those pieces and take them and sort of drive along with it, almost similar to the facilities project that we did where we had various committees with various chairs, all of whom are community members. Not school board members necessarily, but they were
Absolutely.
community members, is maybe using that model to build what you're talking about, which I think is a fabulous idea.
Well, we do have Andrea here who represents PTA and the Girl Scouts.
Mhm.
Both groups are very interested in
That's
doing
great.
something, being involved in some way. So I don't think there's going to be any lack of people who would like to get involved
Yeah.
if the school board would take that on. And it requires, nothing from you guys or the staff at the school, except if you want to be part of it, we can do it. We can take that load off of you and come back to you later with what we want you to do.
So what would you like at this point? Obviously, we need to, as a board, decide, what, obviously, we've got support and commitment from various people on the board, and I think you and I had emailed that, yes, I would love to be part of that as well. And do you have a time frame in mind right now in terms of, getting this together and getting Alex here to be able to have a conversation with you and whoever might be interested in learning more about the plan piece of it? What's sort of in your, knowing that we're heading into budget season?
Number one, after the holidays. Number two, we would like to have something more concrete by town meeting time. Not so we can say, we're at the end of the project and this is what we've concluded, but to report to the community, this is what we've worked on and this is the direction we're going in. And I don't know if that would come from the recycling committee or the select board or whatever. But I think that's a target date, is town meeting, and then maybe the end of the school year to pull together a report or proposal.
That sounds great. Would it be helpful if we had Donna put out onto the listserv calling for volunteers to meet with you
Sure.
at some
Yeah.
point in time? And I could be there as a representative of the board, or one of
Yes.
us could be. And then you could sort of drive what the vision is and pull this team together from that.
Yeah. If you could name it, study group, task force, whatever
Sure.
you want to call it, and say we're putting this together and anybody who's interested, please contact.
Okay, yeah, I think that's manageable
Absolutely.
from our perspective, absolutely. And I think that's a big, wide swath of people that will help you be able to really get some people committed to it and be your captains, your co-captains, your team captains. So, that's great. And thank you for your presentation tonight.
May I just add something?
Yes.
The children are trying to get 500 signatures. So they've got to start, and if anybody's interested in signing their petition, Dan Pastor Strauss, it's in the back there, so they would really appreciate more support.
Thank you.
Excellent, thank
And
you.
the last little tidbit, and I know I've already gone on too long, is our logo is this otter. Choose to reuse the otter. The otter needs a name. So we've had this is a recyclable, compostable plastic cup in the Everyday Cafe, and at the polls, we asked people to put their name suggestions in here for the otter, and Joellen has had it here at the school for about a week. So we've got a lot of suggestions in here, and I said, Steve, how can we make an event of, announcing the name of the otter? He suggested that at the concert, the holiday concert, December 11th, that we could announce the name of the otter.
It's a big crowd, December 11th.
Yeah.
It's the biggest
So-
crowd you're going to get this season, I can tell you.
Okay, thank you.
Great,
And the
thank you.
rearview mirror hanger is a great idea.
These, you can see these across the parking lot, like
Yeah.
the handicap parking sign. It says, bring your bags and choose to refuse. It's automatic. It's great advertisement for behavior change. So, yeah.
Cool, great. Thanks,
If
Bonnie.
anybody didn't get a bag, I
Door prize. Thank you, Bonnie. All right, Steve.
Sure. And Bill, and thank you. Thanks, everybody, for going on the tour. This is our road show. 2 weeks ago, we were at the Science Labs, and 2 weeks from now, we will be at Maple Street School. And again, there will be tours there prior to for those interested. We're on a journey to take a more in-depth look at each subcomponent of the facility project, helping the Hopkinton School Board, hopefully providing them with information that they need to make a decision going in to the next stage of warrant and March meeting. So tonight, we're gonna take a look at really it's the overcrowding component here. And as in 2 weeks ago, I started with why, and again, that's one of the mantras that we do. Start with why tonight, and then 2 weeks from now, I will certainly start with why, where the deferred maintenance and things, why we were in the position we were at. But tonight, why are we here? What has happened? Why are we in this state of what we'd call overcrowding? Well, fundamentally, that's an example. That's our current enrollment, and as you can see, there's a couple of reasons. One of them, in 2002 or 2003, a classroom was lost. Actually, this classroom was lost because preschool moved. For those who've been around a while, it was Columbia Hall, and I was over at preschool a couple of times at Columbia Hall. So that came in, that moved in 2002, 2003, and then of course in 2012, 13, 14, and finally adopted a full-day kindergarten in 14, 15. So that's a two classroom increase plus preschool. But we also have some in-migration going. As you can see, we had 73 students, and now we're up to 82. We had 60 to 65, 65 to 71. So when we have grades increase from year to year, we call that in-migration, more coming in. So we have an increase there. And we also have instructional focus. We have change in program. I usually present in the budget process, I talk about what are the main drivers of our educational program at all our schools. And years ago, I talked about literacy and numeracy being the drivers here. And now we had literacy, numeracy, and behavior. So we adopt what's called a targeted accelerated growth loop, where we need sometimes we need smaller spaces to target instruction based on where kids are, either in enrichment or in remediation. And so we need defined spaces in literacy and numeracy. And as I've talked about a few meetings, we've taken on a much more explicit, deliberate, and purposeful instructing of behavior. So those are the components. So things have changed. Preschool is here, full-day kindergarten's here, and our enrollment in migration, and our programmatic offerings from full-day kindergarten plus targeted, accelerated growth in our defined areas. So this is our current enrollment. And as Mr. O'Brien alluded to, and we'll make sure if it's not on, this will be up on the web as soon as we can. This are the New England School Development Council, and I talked about this 2 weeks ago when we were at the science labs. Years ago, it was Schoolhouse Consulting, and then we did it in-house. And then right at the cusp of when we had a turn, this whole work, the facility project we started 5 years ago, originally was a school consolidation project. We thought that, we proffered that the best way to move forward in a facility improvement project was to follow in other neighboring districts and consolidate and take a building offline and reconfigure our schools. Then the enrollment took a turn, pivoted to increased again, and the cost to replicate, and this is something that I've written about in some emails, Maple Street has about 12 classrooms. Just the cost to replicate 12 classrooms is so high, $7, $8, $9 million, that just to replicate them at another site would cost so much more than actually fixing some of our issues. So a couple of highlights. One of the things that I know that keeps Bill up at night, and it would keep me up at night too, is that number right there, which is an 86 kindergarten. I look back, I have never seen an 86 in the Hopkinton School District. I've never seen a kindergarten class in the 80s or projected to the 80s. And an 86, and as I said, Bill doesn't sleep much anyway, but certainly that keeps him up. So that's not in 10 years from now, that's 2 years from now. That's projected to be 2021. The other piece, which is a fundamental shift, if you just follow this, you see a common tens digit, 70s all the way through. That's different. If you go back, we were in the 60s, we're in the 50s. We've been in the 50s for every class before when we were trying to consolidate schools. But now we're projected that the norm would be 70 plus, and we have an outlier of 86. Again, these are projections. They've done pretty well. I think, Michelle, is our second or third year of NESDEC? Second year. And they've done pretty well. But so we're trying to plan for our current enrollment and trying to plan somewhat for projections. So that's why we're here. We're trying to take a look at what is the best way to address the programmatic changes, full-day kindergarten, preschool, targeted, and also the projected growth. One of the things that Jay Burgess and I and Dave, when we had the facility committee, talk about, We certainly didn't want to have a school project and then need a portable the next year. That wouldn't be the greatest approach. So let's talk about needs. Now, so when we were talking about consolidating, and a lot of the first year of our facility project was talking about consolidation. What does a two-school district look like? And if you go back and look at the report, the elementary ed specs talked about what's the advantage of a 1 K through 5 school. And so when we were talking about consolidating, what were we building for? And one of the languages, and I'll try to unpack this and hopefully be clear, we are typically, we call it a 4. So that means we're typically a 4-section district. So by a grade level, so a kindergarten is like a 65, that's a 4 kindergartens. So that's a 4. And that's typically what we are, with an occasional, when I was building principal, we had a graduating class in Hopkinton at 106. I think that is the biggest in history. And that didn't start in the 80s, by the way. That wasn't an 80s kindergarten years before. It was a big kindergarten, it was in the 80s. So 106 would be a 5er. You'd have 5 sections, about 20, 21. And Tim Stokes was as passionate, as committed to this concept as anybody, and really, I think, moved the committee. Because when we're talking about consolidating, we weren't talking about building 4s in every grade. We were talking about every other would be a 4 and a 3. And that way, you'd think, based on enrollment, if we're in the 50s, we're okay with a 3. If we're in the 60s, we're a 4. But Tim was absolutely committed that we have to plan for 4 in every grade. And he was prescient in that now that's where we are. So Bill and I have talked about this. We met today with Brew all this data. And the facility committee is recommending that as core classroom spaces, classroom is 17. That's 1 preschool, 4K, 4-1, 4-2, 4-3. You with me? So we think that will have enough capacity for, certainly historically going back, to take care of the blips when you have a 5 and a 3, if we had a 5 and a 3. If we went, just to be clear and transparent, if we were all 5s, we wouldn't have enough room. We've never been all 5s. We've never been all 5s in any 4 consecutive grades in this entire district. Okay? That would be, so we're looking at a 17 classroom space is 4s and a 1 for preschool. Everybody okay? And then we're looking at an art room and a music room. So this is where we are. So a 17 is the needs if we're a P through 3 school. P, K, 1, 2, 3. We have an art room and a music room. Now currently, we offer student services space in small rooms. One is about a half, that's a 0.5, that's about half a classroom. The others are about a quarter classroom. And that space is flexible enough that meets the needs. So we think we're okay. There's a mouse in my pocket. Bill thinks he's okay. Because Bill knows Harold more than anyone else. So the literacy room right now is in a small room, which is substandard. It's a fuse box room. It's actually a custodian room converted. And it's a quarter of a room. It's okay. Bill would like more windows and more ventilation, but it is not atypical for public school to have an educational space like that. So in literacy right now, we're at a quarter size room that's substandard and a quarter that's okay. Numeracy, believe it or not, right now is about a 1/10 of a room. It's actually in part of the separation in the library. And also, they deliver lots of services on, I want to say picnic table, but it's almost like a picnic right outside. So they're at a 1/10. And then behavior, we have a substandard, about a quarter of a classroom. So where do we want to go? So 17 plus 1 plus 1 gets us classroom spaces for 4s, a designated art, and a designated music. Student services is okay. Literacy, we would like about a 450, 500 square feet space. Numeracy, about the same, and behavior, about the same. And all I did was so tonight there's two options I'm going to discuss in depth. One is, what are the implications of simply adding classrooms here? And then I'm going to talk about moving 6th grade up and opening space. So obviously, if we just take the 3rd grade and move those to Maple, I subtracted 4, and hopefully I subtracted correctly as a former math teacher. So that's what we're shooting for. We're shooting for a project that gives us 17, 1, 1, and then some ancillary targeted space. Now, what if we go to a 5? well, then the art and music room can go into one room. It's no problem. That's how we do it. Maple, that's how we hear. And we have flexible space. Hopefully you heard that 2 weeks ago. You'll hear it in 2 weeks, and you'll hear it. The goal is to create flexible space, a space designed for art music, but which could be converted in those years that we have we have more fives. You with me on the fives? So we have a flexible space. We cannot afford, and this is what the committee, the facility committee, and Dave and Bill Jones and worked on, that we can't build out for the maximum fives that we wouldn't need because that's just too expensive. So you build for fours and probably for flexible space on the ebbs and flows. And so the art and music, and sometimes in the years if we went to threes, then the targeted could actually have more space. And that's not dissimilar to how Bill approaches it. But now, just to be clear, the 16 we have right now is one substandard staff room. So this 17 is staff room going back to a staff room. But I also want, and something that Jay is continually work with Harriman on, and under Liz's direction, I secured Mark Lee, Dan Beeson, and Jay coming for the 2 weeks from now, so the board can have a lot of questions for Dan and Mark. That one of the, in the $29 million project was an extensive reno of the office space here. And the office space here, as Bill showed you, is substandard. The nursing space needs to be changed, and the conference room needs to be changed. So the subcommittee, Dave, Jay, and I met this summer and talked about how can we renovate some space but not change the footprint? Because once you start building foundation footprint, the cost goes up. So the plan, the concept is the room next to, adjacent to the office, would be reduced to about a half size, and that would be the expand of the office. So this we can do, well, I'm going to talk about the next four. So if we add 4 new classrooms, so this is 6 new spaces, okay, and this is going out by Kathy Forgel's room, the old art room, and going left. So this becomes a courtyard in there. So this is 6 new spaces, but this is classroom space already. Because they had to take some space because what Mark would say, Steve, you got to have a hallway. So the 1 and 2s are pairs. So these are 4 classrooms, but this space has to be renovated and expanded to include the hallway. Everybody with me? Everybody okay? So this is now, if you look, and this is the plans that were generated for the $29 million project. This, which you'll never see me produce, was the SAU office for a lot of money. So this is 4 new classrooms, additional classroom spaces, okay? But there's a plan to reclaim some classroom space adjacent to the office, which would be a reduction of 1 classroom. So this would net 3. But it would also net some targeted instructional space for behavior, literacy, or numeracy, which would be remaining after we increase the size of the office by taking some of that classroom. Everybody okay? So does it do what we need? So Bill looked me in the eye and told me 3 times today, Steve, we have 16 currently, right? No, we have 16 current quality classrooms. Okay, I'm going to add 3. That is going to be 19 quality. I can't add 4 because I'm taking 1. You with me? So that gives us 19 quality. So that gives us 1 in preschool. That gives us 4 threes. I mean, it's 4 all the way, K, 1, 2, 3. That's 17. You with me? Plus 2 art music. So this plan, adding 4, netting 3, gives us 4s across the board plus flexible art music space, which we think, I think, there's a mouse in my pocket, Bill thinks this too, that will give us the amount of space necessary to handle the ebbs of flows. But to repeat it, if we go 5ers, if we go 5ers, that's a different, to be honest with you, if we go 5 5s, 4 5s, this is something we've never seen before in the Hopkinton School District. So this, by adding net 3, gives us an art room and music room, target instructional space, but notice it has to be flexible. if we go beyond the 4s, if we need a 5, 2 years from now we need 5 kindergartens, then Bill would say, okay, the art, music are going the same. I'm just talking. Bill run the show, right? But this in concept, art, music go into one room, which is where they are now, and we've got enough for 5 kindergartens. Now we go back-to-back 5ers, which we've never seen it, right? We've never seen that. Now, then we can, if we wanted to, we could go back to take the staff room. There is some flexibility. But we're not building for 5ers. We're building for 4s, plus flexible space that could compensate for pluses and minuses. Does that make sense? Everybody okay with that? And this work is all from the facility committee work that produced a component of the big project that was last year. This is right. Expanding Maple was the work we did last year. I'm just adding it to the presentation today. I mean, at Herald. Everybody okay? So, what does this do? So Jay Burgess, when he spoke to the joint meeting and he spoke to the board, talked about the escalator of 10% one year and 5% the next. I took Harriman's numbers, this is just me, Harriman's numbers that they produced in the $29 million project, multiplied it by 1.1 and 1.0, and then added 1.05, and that's what I got, about $5 million. And then I took the number, because you're going to see another number, and this is a little bit more than one of the projects I'm going to talk about in a minute. So I got an approximate tax rate of about 61 cents per thousand for netting 3 classrooms, Harold Martin. But this is my numbers, and this is an estimate. That little tilde, that means it's just an estimate. Okay?
Is that a bond, or is that a 1 year,
That's
all paid off?
No, it's a 20-year bond.
Okay.
Sorry, a 20-year bond, 4%, produced an estimate from the bond bank's data. And last week I talked about that. I had to follow, 2 weeks ago I talked about following up regarding the valuation. And the valuation that they use is the valuation, as Michelle Clark said, without utilities. So there's a valuation of 620 and about 599-ish, if you give me an ish. The one that the bond bank typically uses when they produce tax valuations to bonds is the one without utilities. So that was the question I had for them, and that's what they answered. Anybody remember that from last week? Okay? Again, this isn't a bond bank number. This is an estimate by me. All right? Just because I sent them a whole bunch of other numbers, and it was today. So one option, why we're here, full day kindergarten, preschool, target accelerated growth, flexible spacing. One option is to add space on this campus. What's another option? Option 2, move 6th grade to Hopkinton Middle and High School. So this option took a lot of traction when we were closing Maple Street School. That's where this discussion came from. That 6 was going to go up, K through 5 here. That year that we started talking about this, and going back 5 or 6 years, the Hopkinton, before this project started, the board spent a year, charged the superintendent to collect data on 2 things. There was 2 questions. We did listening posts all over the district on 2 questions. 1, what do you think about a school configuration of 6 through 12, K through 5? And the second one is, what do you think about inviting other schools and school districts to join the district? I spent a year. I did listening posts. Liz, we all did. We did listening posts at Herald, Maple, high school, mornings. We did. So what came from that was, and it was actually, Dave, I think you were there, Maddie Kaplan came and spoke about, she thought, and Maddie to me, I think, is a very well-respected elementary school teacher. High school library, we were there and said, the 6 through 12 is the best configuration. The K through 5 is the best. From her, it was certainly a valued opinion. To be completely frank in this group, the feedback on expanding our footprint and inviting others, I don't think there was any meeting where that was a prevailing wisdom. Like I did this 4 or 5 times that year, and no one said, yes, Steve, let's invite Dunbarton, let's invite Ware, Henniker, Webster. It just wasn't traction. But there was traction to this notion if we're going to consolidate to do this. So what are the benefits and the concerns about moving up to the 6th grade, 6th grade up to Herald? Well, academically. So we have at Hopkinton Middle School a 7th and 8th grade middle school program. The middle school philosophy is at that age level, at that developmental level, is to expose them to as many different activities and different content areas and different disciplines as you possibly can. That is why it's very privileged to have a choice of 3 different world languages, to have a 5 unified arts program, to have geography, to have math, to have defined engineering, family consumer, and wood technology. One of the, since I was a high school principal to superintendent, it is not uncommon for someone to say, Steve, how come we don't have world language K-12? And we've talked, Bill and I have talked about it, and Amy, Michael Bissett and I talked about it back in the old days. And it was always very difficult, A, for the school day, and A, to try and configure that in the priorities of the funding. But if you move 6th grade up, all of a sudden, at least we've gone to 6th grade for world language, which is a very nice 6 through 12 for a language could be a really strong program. So there are academic programmatic benefits by moving the 6th grade up. They get an expansive program, world language, family consumer. And one of the things, again, Tim Stokes, who was chair of the Elementary Ed Specs Committee, talked about, what about the social emotional? What about this notion of sending a 6th grader all the way up to the high school? Sure.
I have a question. Is there any other school districts that you can think of that have that similar formula?
Sure. 6 through 12?
Yeah.
And it's funny, we talked about that just recently. I believe the Sunapee and Wilton, I think, are in the ballpark of it. Now, when I was a principal 10 years ago, North Conway, Kennett, was a middle 6 through 12, and Guilford was a 6 through 12. Kennett built a middle school, so they're no longer 6 through 12, and so did Guilford. We want to check, and actually, Matt, Pittsfield is not, because you checked that for me, I think.
They're 7 through 12.
7 through 12. In the old days, there was a K through 12 for a long time too, and I think there's some K through 12s up north. Okay. So that concern or anxiety about a 6th grader going up, I could never alleviate that and not address that as certainly a concern. A couple of things about our philosophy about 7 through 12, which would extrapolate to the 6 through 12. One of the guiding components when you have a 7 through 12 is try to be deliberate and purposeful whenever you put those groups together. What does that mean? You have separate breaks and separate lunches. You try to eliminate, and if we went to a 6 through 8 middle school, there is potential to go back to a different program, a different day. So in the years ago, when we had a different staffing configuration, passing times were different. Middle school had different passing times. They've always shared unified art space and some world language space. I had a discussion with the assistant principal about, in her experience, because I've actually been gone a long time. I've been gone 10 years. It's funny, 16 years ago, I don't know if anybody with long time graduate, there was the tradition in Hopkinton that there was one 7 through 12 dance. And that was the homecoming dance. And one of the first things homecoming is usually October. In October of my first year as principal, I said, no more. I said, I can't put 7th and 8th graders at the same dance as 9th through 12th graders. And believe it or not, I got killed. And actually, they went to the superintendent to overturn my decision. And I said to the superintendent, this was when I was a smart aleck, and I said, well, if you want to have 7 through 12, then you're chaperoning it, not me. And it was definitely the right decision developmentally. So we don't share social events, we don't share lunches, we don't share breaks. But how do we deliberately and purposefully put them together? Mentorship and tutoring. There is a great resource that if you have a youngster who needs a big brother type issue or relation or tutoring. And I talked to Rebecca, that the frequency of that kind of support for the younger grades is decreasing because of the overschedule. It is very difficult to schedule these kids as support in this program. So one of the things, we're one of the few districts that commingle K through 12 on buses. We do a K through 12 ride for buses. I guess 12 might be a stretch, because I don't know how many seniors are riding buses, I guess, but a few. What about the staffing? The staffing needs. A 6 through 12 does create some interesting staffing dynamics. We add 80 kids to the middle high schools. Do you add guidance? Do you add administration? How does that work, and is it partial? If we went and moved 6th grade up with a full middle school program, it would be about a teacher and a half between world language and unified arts. So to implement to the enhanced educational program that we're talking about by making the 6th grade part of the middle school, it's about a teacher and a half, if you give me an ish. And here's one of the pieces, and this is something that we debated long and hard in the 6th grade up component. One of which is, if you move 6th grade up, do you have to have a second gym? Because at one point, the vision of this facility project was to also meet the needs of the community. And as the former arbiter to the gym space at the secondary level, having one gym in the district, it was a struggle, and there's so much use. So could we meet that need? And if you move 6th grade up, how does it impact the program without a second gym? And for a long time, the second gym and auditorium was in, and then it was pulled for the board's project. But one thing, the hope is that you do as a building leader, and Bill would say this, and Amy and Chris and Rebecca, the goal is to have a facility that enhances educational program, not drive your educational program. And one of the concerns is, if you're adding 80 kids to the high school, what about core instructional space? What about a second gym or support space? Or what about food service? And I spent a lot of time with Rebecca, who runs the schedule, and we looked at numbers. And the concern for me is, if we move the 6th grade up without expanding cafeteria space, we'd be forced to have lunch at 10 a.m., or we'd be forced to split an academic block by 20 minutes here and 20 minutes there, and all of a sudden the building is driving your academic program, not the educational endeavors. So as your superintendent, someone who's lived in that building and someone who's looked at schools, the concern is that if the support moves forward without expanding the cafeteria space, at some point someone's going to look and say, what in the world did we do? Because now we are creating a schedule, we are creating a dynamic where the building is driving our educational choices, not what's best for kids educationally. So I feel very strongly, I would love to save this money. I would love to put this money into other areas. But I don't believe that you can move 80 kids up and go with 6 through 12 without increasing cafeteria space. But back to flexibility. One of the things that is intriguing, the 3,000 square foot addition, just about the size of a half court. You put a Mondo floor down, which is the floor we have at Harold Martin School. And at one of the tours I gave last year, one of the persons said, I won't support this program unless we have yoga space. Well, we've got yoga space. We have dance space. We don't have gym, we don't have basketball hoops, we don't have a gym space, but we have exercise space, which isn't a bad gig. So again, flexible space. That's the cafeteria right there. This would be the additional space. They round it off and go there. So
it's the yurt that's been squared
yurt's
off.
gone. Yurt is gone.
Squared off.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. This is the gym. This is the yurt, and this is where we'd have the cafeteria space. Now, one of the things that would be included is, and if you've been in some high schools now, and Concord High School actually called it a demonstration kitchen. So in order to alleviate some of the crowding in lines, you have your deli, made-to-order sandwiches booth right there. That's the way Concord High does. It's like an exhibition. It's like an exhibition kitchen. So you do alleviate. If you're interested in a deli, you come here. So you alleviate some of the line there. So that's how you do this without a major restructuring of the kitchen. Social emotional concerns. We do the very best we can. Oh, I don't think did I show you? Oh, so here, I apologize. Here are the additional classrooms. So where we were last week, 2 weeks ago with the meeting, we were here. You with me? Science labs. This is the current current engineering. Harriman knocks those down, puts 4 classrooms, 4 classrooms, and installs a renovated wood tech or a technical program and engineering program. So I'm sorry I didn't point those out. So this is where they put them. 4 classrooms here. Okay. Sorry about that. I think we're okay. So let's talk about the classrooms. The classrooms. Now this is Harriman money and bond bank. That's why the tilde is gone, the bond bank. So this is about 4.8. and 60 cents per thousand, so I added a penny. That's where I got the penny. And the expanded cafeteria is about 4 million, about 50 cents per thousand. 4% bond, 20 bond. Level debt means the board has always tried a level tax rate, so this is a level debt approach, so that 50 cents is every year, as opposed to level principal. We can do whatever you want, but that's one usually that the board asks me to do. Questions? Tell you where I am. One of the things that I try to do is, in my time, I've been in the Hopkinton School District 20 years, and what's driven my work and the work with Bill and work with leadership work for this school board is what's best for kids. What is best for kids? So through the lens of what is best for kids, what is the recommendation of your superintendent of schools? There are current deficiencies. If you've heard me speak, and the board's probably tired of this, and sometimes they want to kick me on the table and say, Steve, we've heard you. We do not have a designated person full-time working on curriculum instruction and assessment in the school district. We have a lot of people doing a piece. We have a lot of great people doing great work, but we don't have someone whose full-time job is to work on improving curriculum, improving instruction, and improving assessment. I think that's a weakness in the Hopkinton School District. We do not have a full-time person working with our most complex and needy and at-risk and intense families. We don't have a social worker. Most districts, and districts our size, have a full-time curriculum person. Smaller than us have a full-time curriculum person. Districts have a full-time social work person. We don't have a full-time director-level position on human resources. We have 180 employees. The business administrator, superintendent, building principals apply their expertise to working in human resources. Sometimes we have our Title IX, which should be an HR director, be a student services director, and the implementation of that role can sometimes hurt the relationship between a director of student services and a person under investigation. We don't have building level special ed support, coordinator support. Those are some things that I think would see a measure would reduce risk or improve the quality of our education. The cost of these projects. I would love to have a Mondo floor. I would love to expand, but that notion of $9 million to move up the sixth grade, and I know Dave especially and Liz, who've been around me doing this a long time, it really truly is my recommendation that we expand Herald and not move the sixth grade up because of the cost of the project, the cost of the staffing, and the priorities of the future priorities of the district, that we start really really have the board put full their attention to the less than $5 million project here. One thing I forgot to mention, and happy to take questions after, I forgot to mention is, and Michelle, I appreciate her work at Chief Yale. A year and a half ago, one of the listening posts, I think it was a security listening post, Chief Yale came. And Chief Yale looked me in the eye and said, the biggest thing I'm concerned about right now is sprinklers at Harold Martin School. And depending on, and the Chief has been honest about that, what we've tried to get from the fire marshal and from Chief, is it mandatory? Once we break ground on such a square foot project here, does fixing that deficiency become mandatory? Now, Michelle and I have talked about that. That is almost, I want to say to you, it's almost irrelevant. It's the right thing to do. To have an elementary school not sprinklered, it's probably, whether or not we're forced to or not, ethically, we should have a building in this day and age. So that cost, Harriman put it somewhere in 200,000 range, and we have other information that cistern and the water department, it could be considerably more, so we have to dig in more there. But it could be classrooms plus sprinklers, which I think we need to do anyway, as your superintendent of schools, compared to classrooms plus cafeteria. You with me? Now, I'd make an argument that it's just classrooms because we should do the sprinklers anyway, right? I mean, we should do it anyway. But how you want to frame that, that's up to you. But yes, I believe with the cost of the projects and trying to bring something in within that sweet spot of where the survey said we might get through, that we should focus on expanding Harold. Can I stop now?
Steve, I got a question.
Please do, yeah.
So thanks very much for laying that out, and I think the presentation of the slides was real helpful. And you probably talked about this, but I may have missed it along the way. So just sort of looking at the two of the slides that you put up, one of them being current enrollment, and the other one based on being educational space audit. You've got, basically you've got, you know, pre-K through 3, so you've got 5, essentially 5 grade configurations. Where are they all going right now? How many classrooms are they taking up right now?
So right now, we have 1 on preschool, 4K, 4-1, 4-3, 3 twos,
No, 3 threes, 4 twos, and
4
4
twos.
twos. 4 twos.
And
Sorry,
how
I
many
did know
threes?
this.
I was leading.
What's that?
And how many 3s?
3.
3.
3. Okay, that's what I was
But
missing.
next year.
Next
if
year,
possible, we'll
and I can go back, next year it's a funky year.
Because you've got 71 in 3rd grade right now,
Correct.
and so that's a tight.
It's tight.
Very
Those are that's a heavy. Those are heavy.
23 and 24.
Yeah.
Right, it got big. So it was 65 last year.
Right, and it went to 71.
Right, and so we didn't budget for a 4th,
Right.
right, because it was 65. We were happy guys.
Right. So by,
it's-
by rights, we would want, rather than using 16 classrooms, we would want 17 classrooms.
That's correct.
In this current, with this current class size. Is that?
It's bubbled.
It would be nice.
It's
that
bubbled.
right? You're right on the bubble on that.
Yeah.
So looking at that, and then swinging it over to the educational space audit.
Yes.
On classrooms, you have 16 plus 1 staff room. So is that 16 classrooms plus 1 staff room?
Correct.
So that's what we've got for classroom sized thing.
Right.
That's
The staff room is,
spaces.
the staff room
Right.
is substandard, but yes, that's what we're
Right.
doing right now.
Right, and so the option 1 proposal is essentially to bring that from a 16 classroom footprint to a 19 classroom footprint.
Yes,
Okay.
Correct.
And so with a 19 classroom footprint, if we had the enrollment we had today, we'd be using 17 of those
For classes.
correct.
for classes. And
And then you'd have art, music.
Right, and art and music today each get a half, so an 18th classroom would be, well, these two would be combined, either art or music, and the other one would be art or music.
Correct,
So
that's correct.
now you've got 18 classrooms out of 19 classrooms
If we, right.
available, if we had this configuration right now. And then if we just pushed out, let's see, oh, we're going backwards there. But going down to projected years where you've got, a class size, 3rd grade class size of 102, you'd be at a 5, like I said, so then you'd be at 19 out of 19. So you'd be building for the 1,
Right.
yeah.
And,
Okay.
I think certainly this is not, I'll say it again, this does not take into account if we go to super 5s. But we have enough spread, K, 1, 2, 3, those years, I don't think we're going to get 4 5s. We never have, but if we got 4 5s, we wouldn't have enough space, everybody. Can you afford 8 classrooms? And the facility committee said no. You build out 4 per grade with flexible spacing for the ebbs and flows. That came from our work with Timmy and Jay, the whole group. We fought for it for a while. Jim?
Steve, I have a different question. So 2 weeks ago, you presented sort of the entrance space or a new entrance space. And so when I looked at that last slide you had up, the cafeteria edition, is part of to do that, my assumption is we would have to do the new entrance space. And I only say that because if you don't create the new entrance space, which was $8.2 million?
Right.
You're still, what I would consider, I think members of the community consider sort of an unsafe scenario where you're entering the building through a main entrance that empties into the cafeteria. In this case, it would be 2 cafeterias. And so while they may not be connected sort of in your presentation, in my mind, these 2 things are sort of connected, because if you don't move that, if you don't build a new entrance, we're not improving what is now a pretty unsafe scenario. And actually, we're increasing the security risk by adding a second cafeteria to the main entrance of the building without an office nearby. Is that, I guess I'm saying that it's not part of your presentation. I don't know how the steering committee thought about that, but that's what's running through my mind, is that it's not just the cost of this space at $4 million, it's an additional 8.2 to actually move the sixth grade classroom over here.
I mean, I believe that you could keep, so this entrance would be only for buses. That's it. Just, so locked all day, no card access. And this was, in the original Harriman plan, was a bus loop. It's extensive. I think it was $2 million worth of site work to add another bus loop behind. So when we met, we had to try and find a way to go from 29 to 15. So I agree, Jim, that unless, I believe that the conditioning, the contiguous nature of having an entrance near a parking lot, near the office is an important safety piece. But so if, say we didn't do that, and then how do you get into our school? You get into our school through the gym entrance, or you get here. We are status quo to what we're doing this year, except we're going to have controlled access. But we have not improved the fundamental piece, but we've done a Band-Aid to it.
I think that's what I was gonna say. It seems like if you go that route, you're just gonna have a problem later down the road.
It's the 8.2 million we talked about last week is such a huge number, and I get that. But I think you could, and not best practice though. This is not best. You could do this, not with the entrance. But again, I agree with you. You're not fundamentally improving the situation.
Correct.
And Jim, yeah, go ahead.
Oh, no, I had a separate question.
Oh, no, I was gonna say, and your point is well taken in that when we talked, 4 weeks ago when we started the meeting before we started the presentations, we talked a lot about the hinging of things. We talked a lot about how certain pieces, as they've been extracted into pieces, still have to hinge on other pieces in order to really make those big improvements that we wish we can make. So that's an absolutely valid point. I think it's really important for the community to understand that too, is that although we're presenting these in modules, if you will, is that there are implications that go along with that as to how that impacts other things. And with that comes, for instance, if that's the wish of the community to move sixth grade up, and that is something that's a priority, that not improving the entrance seems like we're only going part way, which means it's going to be another $8 million in order for us to be able to do that. So that's that weighing of priorities that I think that we talked about very early on, and how things they really do interweave with each other with these pieces. So you're absolutely right.
And I guess just to add on, I think if we're making this presentation, at least I feel this way, that if this were like an option, if we're actually calling this option number 2, sixth grade to the middle high school, that we would include that $8.2 million, because
Absolutely, those
Yeah.
are
but it's-
separate things,
Yeah.
right.
Thank you.
they're a separate thing. But I guess I'm saying this presentation is what happens if you move sixth grade. That 8.2 should be included. Because I can't imagine doing a project and ending up without that.
That's right. And the way we broke it down for just the presentation purposes
it.
was, yes, it is. It all hinges with each other.
Options focused on a specific.
And I appreciate you getting to that point, Jim. I'm glad that you were able to get to that point.
And then I guess my second question just goes back to, I guess whatever the building option here at Harold Martin School. And just curious if, this is, what was presented was one option. I'm curious if there's other options for how the classroom configuration space here has been looked at. I know obviously you presented one of them to add some more classroom space, but is that the only one that was considered? Are there other options that the engineering team in the first Harriman study had looked into that could add classroom space here? Or is that really like the one-shot deal that we have quotes for? I'm not saying it's good or bad, I'm just sort of curious.
My understanding, this is what they thought was the most cost-effective, efficient way to address the space needs here.
Okay.
That's what they
didn't give you any
presented.
other options,
They did
just
not.
the one.
Yeah, and I think.
That's my memory.
Yeah, I think that's true, and I think we were actually limited by the site plan too.
And,
Our property.
Right.
and one thing, and to be fully transparent, Jim, they also, at that time, the charge was to put the SAU office in the best location. And so they put the SAU office project inhibit, I don't know if, I mean? I don't know. We didn't say standalone 4 classrooms at Harold. We said, figure out the best place to put the SAU office and how to, so maybe they would have done something different with the SAU.
Can you repeat that? I guess I'm confused
Sure.
with the SAU connection here.
The original project.
The original project had the SAU here.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
No, had the SAU up here.
Yeah, at the site though.
At the-
So, and that's what I mean, so see,
Yeah,
so when they did this,
Yeah.
they were charged with somewhere in our school district, where's the best place the SAU, and I don't know, because this was the SAU, that, did that inhibit, you know, if they didn't have that, restriction about the SAU?
So I guess the answer to my question is that there is additional building space, or there could be additional building space for classroom space that's not just this proposal, but they may not have provided that.
If we wanted 6 classrooms,
But
there'd be room if the SAU wasn't gonna be built on the
Right.
building. Could be a
Okay, so,
possibility,
yeah,
sure.
okay.
So that's what I'm
But
trying to say.
Potentially other
Yeah.
space here.
Right,
Well,
we,
that's
we
the
added a
only space.
governor,
Yeah, that's it.
I added a governor about the SAU, you with me?
But
No, I
it's
guess-
not back here, though, so we're off to the side.
Yeah, no, I don't care where it is on the
Yeah.
building, well, I just.
But they could do that.
Just wondering if there's additional space.
And this was this was office space, and this is old, which is not not recommended. The 1.4 mil SAU is not in the project.
Gotcha, but the space is here.
Yeah.
Thank you.
No problem.
I'd like to open it
Matt had a question.
to, I'm sorry, Matt, go ahead, sorry.
I have a few, sorry. I'm trying to add up the math for the 4.5 at Herald. Because I remember we've talked about construction costs being $400 a square foot for new. So I'm just trying to figure out, how do we get to 4.5? I can't find how that adds up, because I don't imagine that it's all in square footage
Right.
for those classrooms, because
It's all
it's,
soft cost too, though, doesn't it?
Yeah,
but if
it's,
every classroom is 900 square feet, at $400 a square foot, that only gets us to 360,000 a classroom.
and Mark and Dan will come next week, and Jay would tell you 20% soft costs in that piece and how they do it.
And site work.
And this is,
400 per square foot does include the soft cost. That is the all-in
gotcha.
cost per day.
So I don't know how, I can try and find, as Jim requested, all the unpack. I think it's on, this came from the Harriman report, the 135-page report that's on the website.
Okay, so I could look at the one from last
Yes.
year.
This
and see
com-
what went into that.
Correct.
Okay, I'll do that. I'm just curious, because I'm just trying to
It's a
do
great
the math in
question.
my head.
Great
because if
question.
it's only 360,000 classroom, that only, with the soft cost, that gets us to not even.
But it doesn't include contingency.
Or site work.
Site
actually.
work.
Site work is the, you know,
It does
like-
not include.
yeah, because that's additional onto the building.
And we don't
opposed
know
to-
if somehow the sprinkler thing is not incorporated by a piece into that other component of the contingency.
But Dan and Mark will be happy to answer that question when they appear.
That's
And I
great.
apologize that I'm not qualified to answer that.
No, I love the qualified person answering, so that's great. So they'll be here the next meeting?
That's correct.
Okay.
Not Maple Street School.
Okay, sorry, 4 more, I'll be quick though. Well, I'm curious why adding students at the high school means adding staff, because are these students getting new instruction that they were not getting before?
Correct.
And do we believe that every classroom is at capacity today? Every teacher is teaching the number of students that they can teach, or are there savings with scale, right? I mean, adding
Sure.
students, sometimes we can actually, save in
Great.
some ways.
Great question. So, when we were at 877 and we were going down, if the board remembers, we did an awful lot of work trying to, we went to 0.8, remember all that stuff. So at one point, moving kids up was a way to keep teachers whole when we were going to some declining enrollment. So how did I get with a teacher and a half? Currently, it is not an increase to math, English, science, history. So math, English, science, history. Those are the same. But it would be an increase of 4 sections of world language. And it would be an increase of 3 sections or 2 sections of unified arts. That's where I got a teacher and a half.
Okay. Because they're not getting that today.
Correct.
Because it'd be 6th grade up there, it would be new to
Right.
those.
So it's
Yeah.
approximately teacher and a half.
Yeah, I just know if because obviously you move staff from
Right,
Maple Street.
right.
So I
They
didn't know
move
if
up.
were
It's
getting
not
that
any
instruction.
change in science, social, that stuff, but it is world language and unified arts.
Okay. And in response to, I taught at a K-8 for 3 years. It was lovely. I mean, such a great community school. So there are multiple models out there. It all depends on the community. It depends on the instructional needs of for the students. So there are many, many models out there that can be embraced and are embraced.
My biggest concern was just the transition of, there was a study out there from, kids going from that age group to that type of environment, because they do interact with,
Toy with you.
with high school kids and stuff. And, we experienced that with our oldest. We were a little concerned at that point when he was going into high school.
Don't blame me.
And
I get it.
I thought the transition was really well. So I was just trying to go, thinking that with my two kids, are we going through that transition, how that would be
Yeah.
with them? And I was just curious if there was a study out there or something that we could look at. So thank you for.
All right, and I'm curious, are there any other strategies that we are looking at to mitigate this? I feel like we always look at incrementing, adding teachers, at like full increments and not looking at mixed classrooms, teachers teaching 1 and 2 or teaching 2 and 3. And I know we talked about this last budget season, but I'm curious if there are other ways that we can think about growth where instead of, once we hit that threshold, once we hit 7, whatever that number is, 61, 55, whatever that number is, we add a section instead trying to think through other models.
Right, and I appreciate that, and last year at the post-budget cycle, I asked if the board would like to direct the superintendent to work on a multi-age approach. It was not a board priority during that time. It is, during budget process, it is not the best time to make pedagogical changes, because you're not making it based on educational need, you're making it based on financial, so I'm happy to take that on. I don't think, based on enrollment, we have a low, so Bill's gonna hold his breath on this 64. If that 64 grows as much as some have, then are we gonna be a 2s or a 3s? So if we had a 40, Matt, if we had something like that where we could do some multi-age stuff, I think we'd get it, but this is a pretty clear 3. That's a pretty clear 4. We don't have a 3, a short 3, but happy to look, and always open to board's priorities. Is multi-age something that they want? It is. When Barrington has done it, and some other districts have done it, they've done a year of professional development, professional learning, how to differentiate and how to do it. If I missed it, I'm certainly open to it. But I don't think multi-age would save us too much right now based on our whole class approaches. We have pretty much full class.
Yeah, I just think that we've got to decide what other strategies we'd be willing to consider. Because I'm reading this fascinating book that you read before you go to bed so you sleep really well, called Demographics and the Demand for Higher Education. And a report just came out last week talking about how birth rates are once again on the decline. And a few years ago, when the board got a report saying that our district was going to shrink to 700, it's hard to look at that with the report that we just got that said that this school district is going to go to 1,500. So what I'm struggling with is how do you make a 20 or 30 year commitment with that risk, and adding significant amounts of classrooms or spending a lot of money on non-instructional space is just, I don't want to put this district at risk with that.
No, great question, great comment. I'm very comfortable with the 17 plus 2. I don't think we're overbuilding. I don't think we're underbuilding. I think we're right-sizing this place based on academic program. I think we have enough ebb and flow for the 5s and the 3s. But I'm with you. But that's just my opinion.
Final thing, want to check an assumption. The range that we've got on the sprinklers, the range is 200,000 to 1.6 million.
Yeah.
Pretty big range.
Yeah, and I think
It's the cistern.
we had to dig in to see if one was without a cistern, one with a cistern. If Dave remembers when we visited Alton, that was the answer. And I got to look. There was some talk I heard about are they adding a second well in the Harold? Maybe Jim knows if they're adding a second well to the Harold Martin water precinct, and then it wasn't the cisterns necessary, and that might have been the information that Harold was going on. But same thing happened in Alton when they were building. They had to go back for. I think the gap there is a cistern necessary because we don't have a big municipal water.
Right.
But so that's the study that we got to look at, Matt. I think it's a cistern.
Okay, I was just curious about that. Thank you very much.
Water precinct.
Yeah, so Jim doesn't know the answer to that question. It would be the Hopkinton precinct.
Maybe.
On Servon.
Sorry. Yeah, you know.
But I think that's something that we should talk with them about, that may be more, more financially efficient than building a system.
I just have one additional comment if you're done, I'm sorry.
I'm done.
I should be done, but I have one more question, which is, so a couple weeks ago, or 4 weeks ago, whenever it was, we received, the new project budget that the steering committee sort of presented to us as sort of their recommendations, or at least, maybe not recommendations, but places to look. And what I'm hearing today, Steve, is sort of different than what's on this list, and so I'm just sort of curious if this came up in the steering committee proposals, why this wasn't brought forward as sort of as an option. And this is the first time hearing it tonight, that this is sort of your recommendation. which
Sure.
I appreciate.
That's a
I'm just
fair.
sort of curious how the conversation over the summer went on this issue, and
Sure.
we spent, I guess, we spent money to get the rest of the estimates of moving classrooms around, but it sounds to me like your recommendation is something that we already had a couple of years ago in terms of the engineering costs. Anyway, I'm just sort
No,
of curious how this came about.
completely, no, I was a sixth grade move-up guy. As people know, I spoke about it, I listened to it, I talked to a lot of people, thought the educational program, sixth grade, I thought it was gonna do a lot of stuff. The $29 million project, and trying to get to what, the board charged in that $15-17 million range. So we sat down and we thought, I was a part of a lot of work to reduce the project, hoping, to be completely frank, that the reductions of not changing any, not changing the footprint here, not changing the footprint at Maple, moving, adding some CAF and adding some stuff, would come in under 1570. When it came in about $24 million, that's what did it. I've said this a million times. Well, I've said this quite often to people. As your superintendent, I can make you a strong argument why academically moving sixth grade up is a good thing. But now, when there's so much pressure on this project value, that in order to get to be respectful and to hear the feedback that I hear too about this number, to get to a place where we think we can get something passed, and the cost of the cafeteria was $4 million. So to me, it was. And I said this to people I talked to, if you give me sodium pentothal, is sixth grade moving up or hiring someone full-time to work on curriculum assessment instruction going to increase student achievement in their experience in this district? I think having a full-time person work on curriculum assessment instruction will increase student achievement more than sixth grade. And because of the numbers that came in, I'm trying to give the biggest picture I can and say that if we're going to meet some of these priorities that I've talked about as your superintendent for 5 years, about HR, about building level special ed, about social work and that, I don't think committing to a teacher and a half, I can't, if the funds are limited, there was downward pressure on the budget, I can't have so we got to prioritize, we got to triage, and right now I'm going to say, in my opinion, that to meet the needs and priorities of the district, we got to go Herald and not expand it. But I know two people on the steering committee are going to be very unhappy with their superintendent.
Thank you. Oh, I'm sorry, I do. I'm looking at the Harriman report now. It appears that $4.3 million adds 6 classrooms. It adds 2 floors of classrooms to Harold Martin.
Yeah. I think, and I.
It has 10,000 square feet of space. So it looks like 3 classrooms on the first floor, 3 classrooms on the second floor.
This configuration.
Yeah.
That configuration. So
Right.
that would be the
Right.
first.
Right. And again, Mark and Dan have come, Matt, what I believe is that this is current space reconfigured to add the hallway. So it's, I thought I said this is 6 new classrooms, but 6 renovated, 4 new. I don't know if I'm being clear. So, so I'm just talking about this picture right here. Okay.
You lose one.
This is a classroom already, but they have to chop it up, add a hallway. But this is going to look brand new. It's going to have new walls, right? So this is 4
One on top of each other.
new, additional, 4 additional, but we're going to net 3 because I'm taking one. But it's going to you walk down the hall, it looks like 6 new.
In terms of space.
And that's what I've asked, just to be clear. I sent an email last Tuesday to Harriman confirming that anticipation tonight. And as you know, I've had trouble with my spam folder. So, but so that's what I believe. Now, Mark and Dan can come and say, Steve, you're all wet, which has happened before. But Bill and I spent a lot of, I'm throwing you in the bus with me, pal. Well, you spent a lot of time looking at this. I had a little picture and I walked this whole place. Don't you think this is existing?
Yes.
But I did not stay at the Holiday Inn last night. I'm not an architect. This is the best I can do.
At this point, I'd like to just take a few minutes and open questions to those of you who are with us this evening for us up here. We will have another opportunity for public comment, but just right now, just on this presentation. Yes?
You wanna come to the microphone?
Please. Because you're on candid camera too, so.
Do you have streaming going?
We do.
Oh, yeah.
We do.
Hi, my name is Diane LaChance, and there was a discussion last night at the Budget Committee about this project, and I had some questions, and I've been talking with, or emailing with Steve about things about this project that have concerned me, and I'm not talking about the details. I can assure the parents in the room that I care as much as you do that the children get what they need. And I think that as a community member, I'm very concerned that we get it and that we don't break the bank doing it. And in doing so, I've been looking to see how this project has been developing, and I could not find any steering committee meeting minutes. And that bothered me. I asked Steve, and he directed me to some links, and I got some meeting minutes, which were simply one page, and it was more, it was extremely vague. I think they're on the website now, they weren't before. And just listening to the conversation tonight, I'm getting more and more confused about what the scope of the project was to begin with, what the problems are, and what the priorities are. And I was a facilities planner for 18 years, and when we did projects, we clearly stated our priorities, and we kept everybody informed as we went along, the discussions, why we were doing it, and how we're going to do it, and lots of options. This all seems to be happening without any public input. We ask, and they say, oh, the steering committee did this, said this. Well, where are the meeting minutes? I mean, this is almost a $30 million project, and we don't have any information about the process that they've gone through. I hear a lot about what the superintendent would like for the education of the children, but I haven't heard anything about the parents agreeing with it or even understanding why it would be important. I think this project is really only in the beginning stages of even getting off the ground if we want to assure that we're doing what needs to be done, what the parents want done, what the kids need. I just like to read. I mean, I also, and I don't want to be legalese about this. There isn't even a strong penalty, but we do have a law about the right to know and conducting meetings in public, being noticed that the meetings are going to happen, so that the public can come and listen, not necessarily participate. That's up to the committee. But in all the years, I can't find any evidence that that has happened. So we don't really know what the parents think. And the right to know has starts out with a very, I think, telling purpose. And it says, all power residing originally in and being derived from the people. Oh, wait a minute, that's not the part I want to read. The purpose, when it states, openness in the conduct of public business is essential to a democratic society. The purpose of this chapter is to ensure both the greatest possible public access to the actions, discussions, and records of all public bodies and their accountability to the people. That hasn't happened on this project that I can tell. I'm going to sit down and I'll listen to what everybody has to say, but I haven't seen proof of that. And I hear a lot of confusion. I don't hear a lot of options. And the one thing I haven't heard yet is the parents' voice and what parents think. And then we have a whole other group of people, and those are people who live in this town who are going to pay for it, and we would like to see some accountability to the cost. Have we looked at all the possible options? Even at the Budget Committee last night, it was suggested, what if we just expand where the 6th graders are right now? Maybe we can do that for less money than we can at the high school. Has anybody looked at that? I mean, that's just an easy one. But this is a very comprehensive project with a lot of facets to it. And we know very little about it. I can't support it if we're going to be voting on it anytime soon. And I wanted the opportunity to express these concerns. I don't know if other people share with them. I'm just one member of the community. I thank you for listening.
Thank you. And Diane, thank you. I appreciate your perspective on this. Certainly, I think that the board and Steve and certainly his staff have made every effort to inform the community as to the progress of this project starting 4 years ago, 5 years ago. I think we've reiterated ourselves that we've had over 30 events last year that were all open to the public, all of which were noticed, and we had plenty of community members who came, and all of the subcommittees that participated in the formation of the original project was done over a period of years. We had representation from all aspects of our community on those committees. So I appreciate your perspective, and certainly we'll take it into consideration as we continue to move this part of this project forward. That we make every effort to inform the public even more, if need be. But I think we obviously with our resources that we have and the timeline that we're working with right now, we want to make sure that we do it in a thoughtful way as well, and that we're not putting information out there that may not be complete or have gone through the proper process. So I appreciate your perspective. Any other questions about this part of the project? Yes, Melissa.
I had a couple of questions about the high school portion. Can you talk to that?
Oh,
Or whoever's controlling it?
sure. That one?
So I was thinking about Jim's point and how all these pieces fit together. I remain a little bit confused and whether they're duplicating something. So just to be clear, is the vision that these classrooms will be used for sixth grade or that they are for additional classrooms?
How the building administration would structure is really up to the building administration and getting down to, this is concept, getting down to actual plans. I have not directed that Chris and Rebecca that these would be sixth grade classrooms, but these would be 4 classrooms that would handle the increase of sixth grade coming up. It may be, in fact, that's the best way to community and build their own entrance and to make it that way, but I have not directed the building administration that that is so.
Okay, because I was wondering, given that our current idea that the middle school's separated at least in a floor from
Right.
the high school, and I wondered whether it's been considered, since we heard 2 weeks ago, the idea of renovating those science classrooms, which has an extremely high price tag for renovation, whether it would be possible to eliminate that cost by building these as new science classrooms. If you're gonna do new construction, that would right there save the $2 million of renovation, one of those. And by the same token, could the entrance that has that $8 million tag, I realize there are ramps and elevator costs wrapped into that, also be added onto this? So that how these pieces, once they're pulled out, was it ever looked at trying to sort of accomplish 2 goals with one new build rather than multiple builds? The same with the cafeteria and the yurt. Could that entrance be fixed? I remain unclear why that. It seems as if it would be good to have one main entrance to the school rather than a bus entrance, a gym entrance, and ADA entrance. It seems as if it would be ideal to have one. So if we were already going to do new construction, could that happen in that natural place? So have those things been considered?
Some of that was actually part of what we were looking at prior to pulling the plan last March. We had a single unified entrance for buses and for parent drop-off and for student parking, and required significant site work, significant redo. Obviously, part of that plan included moving sixth grade up there, building out the cafeteria, and when you add up all of the work that would have been focused on entrances, security, additional classroom space at the middle high school, you came up with essentially what was closing in on a $30 million plan with that. So what this is doing here by separating the bus drop-off, and I agree, it's not I wouldn't say it's the best approach, but I think it's a more cost-effective approach, and I think that's what we learned earlier this year, that we needed to really go back to the drawing board. I think that was the term that I heard the floor of the school district meeting, go back to the drawing board, come up with something that would fit within the budget of the Hopkinton property taxpayers, and bring something back. There was some guidance we received from members of the budget committee, and we're working with that. We know that we can't get the best solution, particularly with regards to entrances. But we know, and I think Jim pointed out the importance of taking a look at of including that improved security entrance, improved accessibility entrance at the high school. We'd be getting that, and that would certainly move us way beyond where we are today with an entrance, with essentially multiple entrances, but I'd call it the main entrance dumping into a cafeteria.
Okay, I guess I very much appreciate the move away from the $30 million project. I share that in my property tax concern. So I am a parent, but also extremely conscious of that, and I appreciate the work that you're doing. I guess I still remain confused why it's so expensive, but this is maybe a conversation for one of these other meetings, why it's so expensive to fix the front entrance, why it's cheaper to build out the back, as was proposed 2 weeks ago, rather than fix the yurt, or especially if you're already adding a cafeteria.
Well, we can do that, but that's where the parking is in the back.
Right, but if the concern is, I'm not worried about the parking,
Right.
but I'm concerned about the security and having the office staff there, those really pressing concerns, and then the ADA access. I mean, people can walk around, but, so, setting that aside, so.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right, thanks.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Ian? Oh, or Amanda? Sorry. Ian beat you to it, sorry.
Ian Tewksbury.
Faster.
A couple of things were more of a comment and looking ahead to March. One of the questions I think some people ask is what's going to happen when enrollment goes down? It might continue to go up, it might plateau, but some people are probably going to be thinking, okay, well, in 15 years, in 20 years from now, what happens when the enrollment goes down? I'm not looking for an answer, but if you guys could possibly bring that, because somebody's going to ask that in March. If this does get approved, we expand Harold Martin or whatever the project ends up being. In 15 years when enrollment goes down, what's going to happen to those spaces then? I think that'd be a great thing for you guys. If you could bring it in March, that would be fantastic. I'm not skeptical at all about the enrollment projections, but another great thing is either for the next meeting or in March, how are those come up with? Or maybe put those on the website. How are those enrollment projections come up with? Again, I'm not looking for an answer right now, but that's a question that people are going to ask. As a full-time firefighter, not affiliated with the town of Hopkinton and the Hopkinton Fire Department, I personally would love a cistern. If it's going to add $1 million to the project, then no. But it would alleviate not having to add on anything to the Hopkinton Village Precinct, which I'm a member of as far as the water department goes. The other thing is, right now on this end of town, the only fire protection that we have is the dry hydrant by the lake house, and it's not always, to have a 30,000 gallon tank that the school would be able to use, but also the fire department would be able to use. That would be two things. The chief may not want a cistern for whatever reason. Again, I'm not, this is a full-time taxpayer and a full-time firefighter saying a cistern would be great for my fire protection. Chief Yale might have a totally different opinion. He obviously knows more than I do when it comes to that. If we do end up, currently there's two, how does the art and music work currently as far as today?
Art is in the room 3 days a week. Again, art Kim goes to Maple Street 2 days a week. She's here 3 days a week. Music is also 3 days a week, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. Art is Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. So on Wednesday, they share their space. So at this point, anytime they share the room, probably music, because it's a little easier to be mobile, is on a cart. And so he brings his stuff literally on a cart, percussion instruments, guitar, whatever, to classrooms, which is hard because, the teacher will obviously leave. It's their planning time, and they go to my office or they go somewhere else. But that's the way it would work, and that's the way it would probably work if we were in a new plan to share the room.
personally, if we did end up with the Harold Martin expansion and there was a designated art room and a designated music room, I would love to see even more art and music offered to the kids rather than just, for lack of a better word, part-time now, but I think that that would be fantastic. I don't know if it would be possible, but I think it would be great if the school, the school website, like on the front page, had one link that you press and it brings you to all the links of every single thing for the facilities project versus I gotta go to the school board to find the minutes and then I gotta go here to find this. If I, on the front page, I hit one place and then it brought me to all the other links, I would find that extremely user-friendly. Again, I don't know if that's possible for IT or.
There is a
or
link for
I think we have
facilities.
that, yeah.
Okay.
There's a whole site.
Whole
just
tab.
for-
But apparently I'm not finding.
No, but sometime minutes for meetings, I mean, I think we can do a better job of consolidating.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Amanda Gilman. I have, trying to make 4 brief points. First, to echo Diane LaChance's verbiage, and to respond to you, Liz, when you said that the public input was sought, and you guys did a wonderful campaign last year of trying to educate the public about the options after the fact. Once you had already decided them, the steering committee decided them, and that's fine, but that was after the fact. And I think what she's trying to get to is the fact that that there are no meeting minutes. There's nothing for the community to review to see how we got there, how these decisions were made, who was in the final decision-making of the summer, the steering committee of the summer, the select group that we've heard about, don't really know who was involved in formulating this $28 million plan. So she's just, I think, asking, and I second that, for a little more transparency there. In fact, myself and another community member tried to get involved in the building committee early this summer. And I was met with the response initially, well, we'll have to investigate the role of community involvement. And I responded, well, I am the community. And since that time, after the Harriman report came back, Jay Burgess has bent over backwards to provide with information. But it was very closed off and difficult for me to penetrate initially.
Sure, appreciate that.
A feasibility study, I'm wondering if we've ever done one.
On feasibility of what?
Paid an outside consultant, engineering architectural firm, to do a formal feasibility study. I spoke to a project manager and engineer who's renovated 3 schools in the last 2 years in Massachusetts. Mind you, Massachusetts is a different bug. They get state aid, but they do not touch a project without a feasibility study to look at all of the options. What do we do if enrollment goes up? Where are we gonna go if enrollment goes down? So to pay an outside, and bless all the time that the steering committee put in, but I'm wondering if the board would consider the possibility of a feasibility study to answer some of these questions of, are we ever gonna close Maple Street as the enrollment goes down? We need to look at that and plan for that in the future, 10 years from now, and not be thinking about it when it sneaks up on us like this did. So I would like to propose.
Well, and I do encourage you to go back and look at the minutes from 3-4 years ago. There was work done around, and I don't remember the name of the people that we sought out. We have an in-district school architect that has come and spoken to us about in the past, but there's, and I'd have to go back and look myself, Amanda, at what is on, how far back on that website we have all that information, but the steering committee committees, the committees of the steering committee were made up of people who were tasked with various aspects of this feasibility, if you will, and they looked at, they did research, they went out on site visits across the state, they talked with experts in the field, they used experts in their own field, plus pulled in information from other people that they spoke with. That's all on the website in their reports,
I am not
their committee
minimizing
reports.
the
Okay,
amount of
I just want to
effort
make sure
they
you
put in.
found the information
I
that
did.
you're looking for.
Yeah, so what I'm thinking is that each time they had a targeted mission. Initially, it was enrollment's going down, what are we gonna do? About face. Enrollment's going up, what are we gonna do? This, and we haven't ever really thought of a 10-year contingency plan. We need to plan for both options. We need to think about both, because these projections, to me, seem a little crazy. It doesn't seem to me that we can continue to climb when everyone around us is continuing to decline. So I just am proposing that.
I appreciate that, and we did hire an outside consulting company to do those projections, because we used to have somebody here in the community do them. And then when we, and so we hired an outside consulting company to come in and do those projections just for that reason. I hear what you're saying, and the board has had these discussions too. I mean, you know, we look at the information that we have, we gather information from experts that are not only in our community, but outside our community. You know, if we had the crystal ball, we'd be using it. I mean, I think that's one of the things that we all sit and say, you know, we have immediate needs, obviously Harold Martin.
I'm asking you to pay for a crystal ball.
I hear what you're saying. No, I understand. And I just want to make sure that you have all the, all the pieces that have been produced to this
So
point.
I will look
Yeah.
back for those,
Yep.
try and find some references to get those.
Sure,
Thank you.
absolutely. If you can't find them, please reach out and send me an email, and I'll do my
Thank you
best to
very
see if I
much.
can locate them.
I'd like to go back to the cost of the classrooms, the 4.9. I do know from the Harriman report that the cost of 4 classrooms is actually to new construction. So the reason I think that's so expensive is because it's reno and new construction. The cost of 4 over-under square classrooms right here is 1.3 million, not including all-in costs. That brings it up to $2 million. And then it also shows site work of $303,000, but that's site work for this entire space. So 4 over-under classrooms could easily be built, and I don't know the layout, don't know the discussion of where you can build it, but 4 over-under square block, like building a straight-up colonial house with no jogs, is the cheapest thing you can possibly do. You get 4 classrooms. I'd like to propose that it be built outside of the gym, and I don't know the building, issues with that, but I've spoken to an architect and a builder. It's already excavated. The land's divot. It's a dead space. Nobody uses it. Build a hallway right there adjacent to the gym. Lights, windows that face the playground, gives you natural light into that hallway. Extend the existing stairwell out all the way to the end of the 2 classrooms. Light there, a window there, natural light into that hallway. If you like, you could tack on a little $500,000 project to expand that entrance right there on the front and renovate his front entrance and give him the office space that he needs. And for far cheaper than the 4.9, you gain improving his office and 4 classrooms. If you ever need to add on to the cafeteria, I believe you could add on out the back. Perhaps we could look at adding that on right now and getting that extra gymnasium space that we desperately need. But it would be, darn shooting sure it could be 4.9 to do all of that.
Well, I appreciate it. And as Steve said, we have Harriman coming in 2 weeks. I think they're going to be better resourced in terms of getting the real nitty-gritty. I mean, as we know, constructing schools is a lot different than constructing residentially in terms of cost. At least that's what I think we've learned through a little bit of this process, is that school construction is a different animal than a residential construction. But I appreciate those suggestions, and certainly something that I think that the gentleman from Harriman can answer a lot more knowledgeably in terms of what they looked at and the options and the rationale for why they made the decisions that they did and suggestions that they did.
Excellent, I can do that, thank you. And then, very briefly, and I will bring this to the Harriman gentleman, but I just wanted to pose it to the board now. This issue is moving the entrance at the middle high school. Very simply, some double doors could be tacked onto the front of an already beautiful office at the middle high school, where there's that grassy area and there's some flower beds that need some TLC. And 4 to 6 handicap parking spaces could fit nicely in that grassed-in area there. And you now have handicap access to your main office, reno your main office, round the corner to your $1.3 million elevator that we could possibly add on to it, and it's a heck of a lot cheaper than $8 million total.
And we did look, can you speak to that, Dave,
I would love
on the front side of the building there? We did look at that.
Well, we didn't look at, we didn't do design work specifically where you're talking
That's
about, right there. But I think the objective that the steering committee had going forward here was that we wanted to have a main entrance that was proximate to where people park, because not only is that convenient for students, but it's also for community members who are obviously going to park their car and then look for the entrance. So having that right there really does help address, that is part of accessibility.
It's beautiful. That plan is beautiful. I agree. I'm enamored with it.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't call it a beautiful plan. I mean, I think what we'd looked at, what we were looking at a year ago was a comprehensive plan, and that was really a beautiful plan because it really included, all modes of transportation, drop off, and.
Dave, I thought I heard you say, I believe that you said that you like this plan a lot better.
I like it better because I think it's responsive to what the community indicated that they could consider as a reasonable cost or as a fair cost for it. So no, it's not a plan that is everything that everybody could possibly want. It isn't. We've certainly heard, over the 12 years I've been on the board. I mean, Lance Whitehead came in, presented us architectural drawings that he did on his own time to build out another gym space in the town. So, so none of the plans that we've talked about have ever contemplated all of the needs that this community has. I hear what you're saying in terms of what do we do in 20 years when enrollment plateaus or enrollment begins to drop.
I like 8 years, not 20.
Well, you know what? In 8 years, at least the information we have has it coming out more towards 1,400, 1,500 students. I also think it's really important too that everybody in the community recognize that Hopkinton isn't the only school district in the state that's growing. It's not that everybody is sinking, and why is Hopkinton the aberration? Dover's growing, Bedford's growing, Bow's growing. So, you made a statement saying everybody around us is
The small
shrinking.
communities, our peers and cohorts, I do believe,
But,
are shrinking.
but I think it's important that people who are involved with this project look at the facts that are around us. So, working with a professional engineering firm, Harriman Associates, doing a feasibility study early on, starting almost 5 years ago, looking through all of our buildings, what is necessary, what do we need to do? You're right, 5 years ago, we actually were projecting declining enrollment. And we did hit the brakes on the project, rather than continuing with an assumption that was, or with an idea that was no longer valid. So, one of the things we talk about with our students here, and I'm not a teacher, I don't have Matt's experience teaching in schools, but one of the things we talk about is the ability to adapt. We talked about it last night at the Honor Society induction, and how important that is to work with facts and be able to adapt, be able to adjust, and present what we know based on the best information we have. And I believe that's what we're doing. That's what we were doing a year ago, and that's what we're doing today, because now we have a piece of information saying, you know what, this community is not ready for a $30 million project, but it might be ready for a $15 million, $16 million project. And so that's what, that's the new information that the steering committee has and is working with. And this also follows, I think, follows a survey that was taken by, how many respondents?
400 and something.
400 something. So I would guess that a large number of those respondents are parents or of families, and I don't have that information at my fingertips, but we could probably get you that information as to how many people with kids did we hear from that were interested in that responded to the various
So
questions.
my concern, and I have small children, my concern in what is driving me behind this is I know a $28 million bond is not gonna pass. Unfortunately, as I look at the numbers, we are 6.6 million behind in deferred maintenance, another 3.2 million behind in safety and security. $10 million that we've got right off the top. I'm assuming that deferred maintenance and safety and security are needs and not wants. And I have not been through them with a fine-tooth comb, but to me, that $10 million eats up a heck of a lot of the chunk of change of a $12 to $14 million bond that the community member that you just spoke to is willing to support. So if we're looking to get the needed space the space that we need right now, overcrowding, we have to look at the most efficient, the biggest bang for our buck, because we're already $10 million behind. That's my main point. And I'm sorry if I came off as, I did not mean to insult how much effort and everything you put into this. I feel like we're on different pages, and the steering has gone guided by overwhelming principles and has kind of forgotten the big picture. And that's all I'm asking. That's all I'm trying to get across here. And I apologize if it was insulting at all. I did not mean it.
No, I don't take things personally. You can't in this business. I don't think members of the school board do.
That's true.
But we do appreciate people bringing facts to the table and being accurate with what they're presenting. So I thank you for.
And I
appreciate you
think,
hearing me out.
and I think 2 weeks from now, when we do the deferred maintenance piece too, that's gonna be a lot of good information for the community to see the rationale, the decisions that have been made up to this point to where we are right now, so,
And then the Harriman representative will be there at that meeting.
in 2 weeks, correct.
They've confirmed.
Thank you for your time.
I don't think they'll change
Well,
that.
Syracuse,
Yeah.
one thing I love about
Snow
Syracuse is that everyone is smarter than me and more creative. And I'm wondering if there's a way, if we can capture some of these alternate requests, is there any way to prepare Harriman with some of them as scenarios so
Sure.
that we don't on the spot, like the great points that Amanda just brought up, I'd love if Harriman could come as, like, just have some type of primer.
If they want to
so
send
we
me,
don't say,
send me
"Well, let me
questions.
look into that."
Yeah, I wrote some of them down too.
Yeah, if you want to send me questions, I'll try to funnel. My efficiency is good.
Maybe they'd be willing to do a tour.
Hi, my name is Sarah Masson-Dustin. I have, I think, a really simple question. I have very strong recollections of notice after notice, email after email, inviting me and the community to public input and information sessions going back 5 years. And I've heard it suggested that that didn't happen. So I was just wondering if someone on the board would be willing to outline what that process was from the start. Not just in the last couple of years, but going back to when this facility project was originally contemplated several years ago.
Dave or Steve, you, I mean, I'm
Sure,
happy
it
to, you
was.
guys were on the steering
This
committee.
this journey started when the Hopkinton School Board put the facilities in focus. They asked me to review every single document related to facilities 4 or 5 years ago. Every NEAS document, every component, I reviewed them. That night, the board said, we'd like to begin the process of a facility project. Again, the board asked 2 essential questions. What is the optimum school configuration, and is there any desire, appetite for footprint? So for adding Hennecker, Webster, Warner, Dunbarton. So that was our first year. Before we began the project was answering those 2 questions. So after a year of fact-finding, then we came back again. Not very little traction for footprint, but yes, there was traction for a new configuration. Then it took about, to be honest, it took about 4 months to form the facility committee. Jay Burgess stepped forward as the chair. We had all calls, we had applications. Actually, we did an application review. The board reviewed the applications. We actually, we invited some people specifically to fill out some things, people who, to be honest, were critical friends to the process. We wanted them closed. We had subcommittees on financing and energy efficiency, repurposing of Maple Street School, student services accessibility, and ed specs elementary, ed specs secondary. Those committees were staffed. One of the first things we did was try to procure an architect. We did an RFP. We put in, it was actually at a school district meeting, we announced that we wanted to do an RFP. We got $50,000 in the budget for an RFP to procure a facility study. The committee
Wasn't in the budget, it was a separate article.
Separate article. So we procured $50,000 for that. Then it took 6 months we did the RFP, we got responses. We narrowed it down and we did site visits on schools, representative projects of all the firms, and they did presentations to the facility steering committee. We selected Harriman, and then Harriman took over. They did a year of working with the Ed Specs committee. They met, they toured the schools, they worked with our facility director, and they created the report. And then last year, we publicized and we did over 20 events. Every facility subcommittee went and presented their reports to the board. And then every subcommittee had a night. We had tours Saturday mornings twice, 2 Saturdays at every school. And we did night subcommittee meetings. Those were all posted. Those were all in the town crier. Those were all over. Actually, last year we started a Facebook page to try to increase publicity as well. In full transparency, the meetings, they were third Tuesday of every month.
Mm-hmm.
So when they were third Tuesday every month for a year, they were posted, everything was fine. When they were ad hoc, last year we had 2 meetings last year, and it was my mistake. I did not post them at the Cracker Barrel and at the Villager, but we did invite any community member who showed interest and asked to be invited to the meetings, and that was my responsibility. I will make sure that they will be posted at the Cracker Barrel and the Villager and on our website every meeting from there on. But that was my responsibility. And because it was not last minute, it was like, when are we gonna get everybody together? And if Dave remember, I missed one meeting because Chase was playing in the NCAA tournament. But, so that was a little bit funky time for my family. But that's our journey. I think you can see I tried to provide as many updates on the facility program in my emails as I possibly could.
Sarah, does that answer your question? Thank you for.
It does.
Great,
And I think
thank you.
memorializing that in these minutes again is probably valuable, since it seems to be difficult to recreate this history without that kind of timeline.
Thank you, appreciate it. Yes, hi.
Hi, Danae Belt. I would like to thank everybody for all your hard work and trying to do, everything for our schools and our community, so I would just like to say that first off. As a parent of a kindergartner and a sixth grader, I would, also like to echo what Steve said as far as, if indeed the plans are, what looks like the most feasible is to move the sixth grade up to the middle high school, I do definitely feel like, that would need to really, really be looked at as far as, how that is feasibly done to divide the system, to really ensure, I've walked around the high school, I've been in the high school, the library is a shared space, there's a lot of shared spaces, and, so I think that, and, watching the thing from the high school, the science rooms are very inadequate. As somebody who's a full-time nurse and who subs in the school system, like, I feel like science is a big deal, and, is a lot of our future, and there is a lot of stuff that needs to be done at the high school, and maybe like with what Matt was saying, is if, you talk to Harriman and say, like, look, if it is indeed renovating the high school to move sixth grade up, like, what does that entail? How could we, if we move the sixth grade up and renovate that to be as safe as possible, because that is our unsafest entrance possible of all three schools, and all of those issues, like, how would that feasibly look, and what would that be long-term? And how would you do that in the safest manner possible in order to try to preserve having 6th, 7th, and 8th as separate as possible? I do love the idea of having, like, those extra opportunities for a sixth grader, but at the same time, as a labor and delivery nurse, I can tell you that 14-year-olds have babies, and so that's also a true concern. When you start mixing 12-year-olds with 18-year-olds. So I come from all of those different backgrounds to have all of that experience going, that's a thing.
Thank you.
So, thank you very much.
Thank you.
So just on that point really quick,
Yeah.
We know there has to be changes at the middle high school for safety and for security, safety and accessibility. So that happens. We know what moving the sixth grade up to the high school will look like. Not in terms of a final architectural drawing, we don't have that. These are budget engineering drawings. For budgetary purposes. They're not what you'd hand to a builder and say, hey, go build this for me. But we know what that would entail. It would entail the additional 4 classrooms. Good idea. Maybe the new build classrooms are the new molecular biology labs. I don't know that, but we also know that moving 84 kids, I'm picking the number off, I'm not looking at it, but moving 84 kids up to the middle high school is going to put enormous pressure on the cafeteria space. So we know additional cafeteria space. We know it's going to put additional pressure on the indoor gym space. Nope, we didn't make any changes to that. That's going to have to be done through scheduling. So we have a very, very good idea as to what that would look like to move sixth grade up there and what the costs would be to move sixth grade up there. I believe Mr. Chamberlain's recommendation here is to leave sixth grade where it is and build out here at a substantially lower cost in order for us to come down off of that $29 million type project and get it into something that this community can afford.
Yeah.
So.
And I agree with that. I think what I'm hearing from other, like when I listening to people speak and stuff like that, I do kind of echo the thought of, because I get where you guys are showing different aspects of things and showing stuff, but there is for me like even some confusion as far as, okay, well, if we don't do that, if we do this, okay, so if we just add the classrooms here, does that mean we're not doing anything to the high school? Does that mean, I feel like the community members do have a lot of confusion as to what's the final picture.
Right.
And because I feel like we do feel like there needs to be some improvements, but obviously we're all trying to get to a better, more feasible tax.
And part of these 3 meetings, unpacking this, is just to bring that to the surface,
Yeah.
so that people walk away feeling a little better about what they've learned from that, but there are so many moving parts. That is absolutely true. We feel the same way. And talking about it out loud with all of you helps us to also be able to make sure that we're asking and answering the right questions too. So I appreciate that.
Right, and each of these, 3 school board meetings during this month is to unpack one specific problem. So tonight it's to really unpack crowding at elementary. What do we do? And so it's not to say that we only solve that problem, we don't solve security and accessibility at the middle high school, because we unpacked that 2 weeks ago. Am I correct?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so.
Thank you.
Yeah, but we will hopefully be able to pull this all together into one presentation at some point and be able to see all the parts at the same time.
Hi, my name is Pupil. I just want to say thank you for having this. Thank you for answering my questions. Sorry to interrupt you guys during everything. I'm new to this and all that. Steve, there's a couple things that struck to me when you were discussing about a lot of school districts have hired human resource and also people look at the curriculum here. I want to know, like, what do we do right now with that if there's an issue with with teachers with, like, let's say they have a problem with Bill. Sorry, Bill. But, where do they reach out in order to fulfill that? How do we review the curriculum with not having something that's solely focused on that so we can improve it for our kids moving forward?
Sure.
Thank you, guys. I appreciate it.
This year, we've allocated some of Mr. Crow's time to be focused on curriculum. If you stay for the meeting, you're going to hear a proposal from me to the board to talk about creation of a stipended curriculum design specialist position and a Rubicon position. So we do it as a piecemeal. Significant, as superintendent, I spend significant amount of time on curriculum. We have a curriculum council, but we don't have a full-time designated person on curriculum assessment and instruction. It goes in HR, the way we do human resources. It goes, building level takes care of some, business office takes care of some. We're very collaborative in the business office. There's not many HR issues that Michelle and I don't collaborate on. Sometimes she writes the letter, sometimes I write the letter. Negotiation, which in some districts is an HR function, is handled by the team of a business administrator, board, and superintendent. So it's a piece of all our jobs. We don't have a specialist in human resources. We don't have a specialist in curriculum instruction.
You're going to talk about labor. Do you feel like that's something we need here? I mean,
I do.
There's so many parts that go into human resources, of course, but when there's something that is driven for need, then you obviously need that. Do you feel like that in this type of environment, there's that need?
Yes, I do. So, but last year, 2 years ago, the board pinned me down and said, Steve, you have a choice between a social worker and a curriculum instruction as a curriculum person. That day, they caught me in curriculum. Some days I'm telling you social work. Some days I'm telling you HR. So you catch me what's going on. We have great relationships with the community and with our staff. We have people who've given so long that I think there is a level of trust in our employees that Michelle, Bill, and I, we try to do what's best. The board has charged me with doing what we think is right. So I think it's a unique opportunity, but I think not having HR is a risk. Michelle and I had a discussion. The board will hear an extensive discussion about health insurance. And if we had more designated time, could we do something more within our healthcare offerings that could reduce costs? Would it pay for itself? I know Michelle would love to try, figure that out. Curriculum, the board has made it a real goal for me, a real charge to me, is to get a visible curriculum. And we're working hard, but it becomes a piece. It's not the focus of my time, full time. To be honest with you, some of the discussions I've had with families, I chair the family support team. And there is a real need to connect. We have significant number of second-generation parents, grandparents who are parenting kids through a variety of reasons. And they reach out. They reach out to Bill. They reach out to me. They reach out to but we're really nice people. But I'm not trained in social work. I'm not trained to find the resources, but we do it. What drives all this work, honestly, is care, this notion about how we care. And every day we kind of come to work trying to care and help people. But I do believe that if we had those specialties in those areas, they'd get more out of a superintendent, probably get more out of a building principal, but more out of a business administrator.
And so we put, we put 400 towards hardening schools.
We did, that's correct.
As a result of the governor's release of money to school districts to improve safety. $0 went to social work and providing the type of services that can really make a difference, the things that Steve Chamberlain's talking about. I think it's important to understand that a lot of the things that Steve's working on ties right in to how you make schools safer and how you improve the educational opportunities in the district.
Thank you. And thank you all for coming out tonight. Appreciate it. I know it looks like some of you guys probably need to get kids home too, so sorry we're going a little long. At this point, if everybody's had the opportunity to ask questions, I'd like to move on in the agenda. I welcome you all to stay for the rest of the meeting, but I certainly know that it's getting a little late. We have a few more things that we need to cover tonight,
Sure,
and a few action items.
Sure, I'll fire up. I left a discussion item, but I think that discussion just
Yep.
did it. I do want to reiterate
so.
that, Liz, under your direction, I have confirmed that Mark, Dan, and Jay will be there. And I love Matt's idea about any questions that we can preview for them to make that as efficient as possible. I think that's a great idea,
They can prep for them.
and I'm happy to do that.
Who would you like those to go to?
Go to me, and I'll get them to
Sure,
Jay.
okay.
I'm happy to do that. I did want to, want me to just keep flying? 'Cause-
You bet.
Some FY20 budget schedule. The Budget Committee sent out their schedule, and as always, and I appreciate their piece, the first school board presentation of the school board, superintendent budget to the school board is scheduled for December 6th. That's a Thursday. And that's what the Budget Committee says, and I appreciate that. I just want to be very clear. The first presentation of the SOUP budget would be December 6th, which is typically operations, the operational budget, the expense side. The second one would be December 13th. December 13th then is revenues and any adjustment to the expense. And December 20th then is the final budget. That only gives us 3 meetings in December for the budget, which may be very successful and effective. The board in the past has liked having a 4th meeting in case something pops. That gives us 1 day before Christmas, December 21st, and I'm excited to be there next day. But I wondered if the board wants to bank on 3 or have a 4th tentatively January 3rd. Once we have gone to January before the board had a school board budget, the presentation to the Budget Committee is January 9th of the school board budget. That would give us that week when we get back for another board meeting. Originally, I had planned the superintendent budget we presented on November 29th, but then we went the approach of unpacking the facility project. I would not recommend that after a meeting like this for 2 hours, then you fire up and hear the superintendent budget. I know it's a lot of fun, but I think you'll have much to it. So I would recommend 6, 13, 20, and have a tentative meeting for January 3rd on our calendar.
With just an if necessary
I think that's what we did last year. Actually, you and I
Yeah, we did, 'cause it
met
was the 22nd,
at
I think.
Panera on January 1st.
Yeah,
Do you remember that?
Yeah,
You bought me the
we
best
did.
hot chocolate I've ever had.
I know. Oh, yeah.
So is that all right? We're going to go 6, 13, 20 in January 3rd or 4th tentative, but I'm hoping to have a budget on December 20. Cool beans?
Quick
That
question.
also allows for weather.
Timeline for facility as it relates to budget? I mean, what are we committing to from a timeline perspective? That's not
After
a
the
question for you, probably.
Yeah.
After the 29th. So 29th, we'll wrap up doing the unpacking of things. And I think at that point, we really need to move into the budget process, because I think for the board to consider and make a decision about facilities without having seen through at least those 3 meetings of the budget would probably be difficult for us at best, because we have a lot of things hinging on other things. And so I would want to wait first to get Aviva's feedback on it as well. But my thought, Steve, and again, you and I haven't really talked in detail about this, but would be to take the first meeting in January to basically review, since we'll be done with the operating budget at that point. If we don't use the 3rd or the 4th for our operating budget, is to potentially use that date to do facilities. So, I mean, I think that we're in a place now, we have X number of Tuesday nights between now and
I did look at,
January 9th, when Budget Committee meets.
I started looking at auditorium dates for the town hall meeting of budget, select board and all that. Whenever you're ready, I'm hoping that, and it may be, I'm hoping that you have most of the information that you need on November 29th. We'll have unpacked, and if, how much you want to revise or move is up to you
Yeah,
guys.
I think I'd like to, on November 29th, have that sort of formulated, once we get this next meeting done. You know, again, trying to gauge the number of people that have come out to these and the kinds of questions we're getting, and the kinds of, input and things like that. I think that going through the 29th to see how that is, and then on the 29th decide, at that point, present where we're gonna go in terms of dates to be able to wrap up the facilities piece of the project. But Dave, you missed that discussion about where we're gonna go with facilities from here.
I'll catch up with you.
So, and my comment only was that I really think we need to see through the review of the operating budget before the board makes a decision
Yeah.
about facilities. That's just again, at this point, that's my,
There's a hard deadline for bond.
Right.
It's in the schedule that we have to have a bond hearing. So the earlier that the board can make a decision, Michelle and I have started to schedule a time with a bond consultant to help us through the process.
So I guess just my only comment on it, I mean, for one, I would have a hard time stopping the conversation on facilities on November 29th, switching operation, and then trying to pick up facilities again in January, and then thinking we can get to a conclusion on
Right.
how that conversation goes before we have to go to a bond. So I guess my suggestion is I think we're gonna have to chew gum and walk at the same time. We're gonna have to do operating budget as well as continue to have conversations on facility, because I'm just not sure how we get everything done and satisfy what the budget committee's gonna need, and the community's gonna need to try to start and stop again. So I don't know how we structure it. I
so
guess.
why don't we chew on that a little bit, and then on the 29th, we'll, because I agree with you, Jim. I think, again, we're working, we have a lot of big things that we need to do, and whether the cart comes first or the horse comes first, or whether we need to gallop along to each other, by side, and that's where I think we are right now. But I also think in 2 weeks, I think we're gonna have a little bit more information. I feel like we have more input tonight than we did 2 weeks ago. I think in 2 weeks, we'll have even more input, maybe give us a little bit more information to sort of move forward from there. But let's just say that on the 29th, we will make a decision about what we're going to do and the dates that we'll do it on.
Fair enough.
Good, thank you for that.
So just one final, December 6th, December 13th, December 20 will be budget, FY '20 presentations. January 9th to the Budget Committee, usually 16th, 23rd to the Budget Committee. Sometimes they like us back on the 30th. And then the February 7th, I don't have it right in front of me, but I think February 7th, something like that, is a public hearing.
And so are we gonna schedule the 3rd as a tentative date, and then, so just put it on the calendars?
I'd like to.
Yeah, I agree.
Is that, I don't have it in front, is that a Thursday?
It is.
Yes.
Oh, ding dang, we nailed it.
We don't want to put them, that's a Friday.
Jim, want to provide a quick budget update from, Budget Committee update
I
from
would
us?
love nothing more. So I've had fun spending time with all the budget committee members left in the city, well, not all of them, excuse me, Janet. Connor's still here, but I've spent the last couple days more time with them than I have at home, which has been great. So I'll just run through
It's a
like,
good instant pot.
I'm just gonna run through quickly stuff that we talked about. I provided the financial statement from October 18th that was provided. There wasn't really any questions on it, I think it was good. As I said earlier, I showed the enrollment figures to try to give them, I think, the context that we provided today. I think there were some questions on it, but that was great. I presented the facility project presentations, not really Steve has done it, but just in general, because I think members of the budget committee, some have come to our meetings, some haven't, so giving them some sort of the high level conversation. To summarize their comments on it, was that I think they're looking for more information. I mean, they're looking for, I think, more cost breakdown, sort of what we've been talking about here and what some community members have discussed. I think they're hungry for it, and I think they really want to understand it, which I think we all do, so that's good. There was, I think one of the projects, and we've talked about this a lot, of the budget committee would like us to really be working on with them is the programmatic budget. And so I think there was a little bit of frustration that there wasn't a programmatic budget brought back to them after our last meeting. Some of that's probably on me, and I talked to Michelle that it's with the vendor, and there's corrections being made. But I think they wanted just really to stress that they have a very strong interest in that. I think they really want to understand our budget better, and I think they're having, for all sorts of reasons, having struggling to do that. I think the programmatic budget is really gonna help, and so I think there's just a strong desire, that we continue to work on that, I think the budget committee understands that these are drafts, we're gonna continue to kind of build upon it. But I think they really wanna continue that conversation with the school board, to make those dollars useful and informative to, how they can unpack and understand our budget. So I know we're working on it, I just wanna reiterate, that strong feeling. And then there was a really good conversation, going back several meetings ago when they talked about this, and they just really wanted to restate it, not just to us, but also to the select board. Just around how they're thinking about the budgets and how all of our budgets connect to the overall tax rate of the town. The recommendation, the consensus recommendation they had sent us, several months ago, was to try to be shooting for operational budgets within 2 to 4%. I think that was a strong consensus still of the budget committee. They gave that to the select board as well, and I know the select board's struggling to get our budgets to fit within that. I mean, it's not easy. And it's not a mandate. I mean, so the budget committee didn't vote on it. They're not mandating that we come in with that. But I think their strong recommendation to how all of our operational budgets are going to fit together, as well as understanding that there may be this bond coming forward. I think they're with a lot of community members really concerned about tax rate and how all these things impact it. So again, they're not mandating it, I think, but they're strongly recommended that we really think about the operation budget that we're going to present and how that affects the town's ability to do what the town needs to do, and how the bond is going to affect the overall tax rate as well. I think that summarizes, I think, the meeting pretty well. There's probably some things I left out, but
Thank you.
we're all right.
You were kind of put on the spot this afternoon.
Oh, it's fine.
2 o'clock, so thank you.
It's very fresh in my memory.
Thank you.
I'll try and, thank you, I appreciate that, and if at the next meeting, if the board would like to charge the superintendent to bring a superintendent budget or a budget within certain ranges, let me know. Happy to do that. Stop the Bleed program, as I wrote about in board notes, is a part of the Concord Hospital Philanthropy Program, in that they are underwriting the costs of kits to be in common areas in every classroom, that if there was an accident or an incident in which there was excessive bleeding, they would have bandages which have anticoagulants in that would go and stop the bleeding. The district is going to be taking under training and Stop the Bleed at all our, they're going to come in and train all our teachers on how to use these type of bandages and donate some kits and some tourniquets. They did reach out, and what they've done is reached out to neighboring communities about having one in just about every classroom in about every common area, $69 each. If there's 100 classrooms, that would be $6,900. So it's $7,000. Half of that would be underwritten by Concord Hospital, so it's a $3,500 commitment. They are not asking for budgetary funds. That's not their goal. Some communities have large PTO programs, and they just simply write the check. So Liz and I spoke in coming here about how would you like to proceed with this addition, and how would you like to pursue funding? Years ago at Rotary, I really appreciated the Lucas. The town put forward the Lucas machine, reached out to organizations. Rotary was one of them, I think, that contributed to the Lucas. The person who called me said it was like the Lucas machine approach. And so really, Liz, just to try to bring it here, should we solicit community groups or do a solicitation letter? I think the town or the fire department, I think when Chief Schaefer here, right, they did a letter soliciting for support of Lucas, and I think they got enough for 2. I don't know, I've been here a while. So really just looking for some advisement from the board and how they would proceed with a community-based funding for 50% of the Stop the Bleed kits. Just looking for some advice.
How much were the kits?
$69, half paid for by Concord Hospital Philanthropy. So $35. Our cost each.
Yeah, each.
And if there was 100, that'd be 3,500 big ones.
Yeah,
Okay.
so, yeah.
That was it.
$35, and I don't think I would have had Steve brought it to the
Did I
meeting
do all
like
right?
that.
Did I mess that up?
Yeah.
That's an ish. You're giving me an ish, right?
Yeah.
Ish, yeah,
Ish.
ish is great.
Yeah, it's an ish.
And happy to, again, Steve and I spoke briefly about it yesterday. First of all, I think it's a program that is being led in a number of different schools in the area, but I think this is a great opportunity, frankly, for a community within our school community or to take on to do that fundraising and sort of make that something that they do for their own community as well. and whether that, you know, Sam, I'm looking at you a little bit too, you know, whether that's some students that feel that that's really important, you know, certainly.
Have a dance, Sam.
Yeah, I mean, you know, so it's really a little bit about brainstorming ideas, not tonight, but just sort of putting it out there and saying, maybe something will come to mind that, you know, there's a group that I think would really take on this project. Again, given the fact we're heading into a really busy 4 months, it's not a priority from the perspective of asking Steve to send out letters and raise money from the school, you know, from the school side, but I think that it's a great opportunity to put out there because there may be somebody or some group that's really interested in making this happen and can do it on a time frame that, you know, that works. So that was why I suggested he do present it tonight and share it with us, just to give us something to think about. And then, I don't know if you need to make a commitment to the hospital within a certain time frame or not.
No, they're very patient on it, but they make no mistake, their goal is to have every continuous school district with Concord Hospital to have these resources. And I would say we are on the length of the outer end of the compliance continuum.
So anyway, so just some food for thought. How's that?
Sure.
Perfect.
And may I work with PTA or other groups about Rotary, Lions, Women's, PTA,
Yeah.
Dave, no, I'm just kidding. All right, so we'll put together a plan, but if you see something, that's where it's
Some
coming
ideas sharing, yeah.
Thank you. Very quickly, some personnel stuff tonight, asking the board for their support. This is a consensus issue. So as I spoke about, is how are we continually develop curriculum in our schools and in curriculum as well as teacher leaders, as well as, I've been introduced to this notion of micro-credential. Micro-credential is one of the struggles in the teaching profession is advancement tracks. When I was a math teacher at Hollis Brookline High School, to advance in my career, I basically had two avenues. One is become a department chair, or the other is become an administrator. Many people would like some advancement in the field of teaching without necessarily supervising others or in that area. So a micro-credential is a specialized experience, learning opportunity in a designated area that qualifies them to lead areas in the district. So I'm really intrigued by this notion. We are blessed with very experienced teachers who are yearning for responsibility in their field and in their field of passion, not necessarily to supervise others. So that's just a framework for where I'd like to go. Someday I would like to have maybe the first established micro-credential system in the state of New Hampshire, where we provide specialized training in the fields of mindfulness and universal design for learning and curriculum development. And in negotiations, compensate teachers who choose to take on more responsibility and provide advancement in areas within the system. I'm very excited about that. So I ask you to in that frame, I'm looking to post for a curriculum design specialist position. This would work with Bill, and they would monthly provide workshops on designing of curriculum, which is from a standard, competency development, I can statement, and how we go. What is your phrase?
Move from curriculum, make the distance shorter between curriculum and lesson plan. And why Bill plus a teacher? To be honest, it becomes much more authentic and a much higher efficacy when an administrator and teacher work side by side to develop expertise in teachers and to build capacity. I hope in the future when they work together, then we could have two trainers in curriculum design, Bill plus. And I think for this year, working alongside with Bill in a curriculum design area, I think we really do increase our capacity. The board in the current FY19, we have unallocated curriculum team leader positions, so I'm looking to post a position, and the board would enact by supporting a nomination to create a curriculum design position. I'm looking in the neighborhood of about a $1,500 stipend for this position once a month for this position with Bill now through the end of the year, where Bill would put a topic out there and say, today we're going to be developing a competency. Today we're going to be developing I-CAN statements. Today we're going to be unpacking a standard. And today we're going to be using understanding by design. We're going to plan backwards. And so it'd be a workshop model every month led by a teacher and Bill.
Just so I understand, so it's $1,500 stipend. Is that, that's generally what you're asking out of unallocated?
Correct.
For the second half of the year.
Correct. And this will become an action. If I get anybody to take it, then I will nominate them, and you will put this in action by doing that.
So it's just support for posting the position.
Right. I don't like to post stuff without you guys hearing about it. Occasionally I do. I'm just kidding. I don't do it too often.
Where are you thinking about funding it from?
We have money on the curriculum team leader. That was what it was. So it's really a curriculum leadership position. It's just a different frame. Workshop focused as opposed to down and dirty development. The other one is a Rubicon Atlas trainer. Again, once a month to provide opportunity for teachers to learn how to use our, remember Tara, Matt, Phil presented this last spring. And now what I'd like to do is have workshop model after school, continually provide training. Our implementation plan has this full adoption in August of 19. So the more training I provide, to be honest with you, the more I can say I told you so when teachers resist change. So, and to be full transparency, we have one staff member who is fully trained to have this position, and that's Tara. I can post for it, but Tara said we trained her last year, if you remember, to do this job. So I'm asking to post, and it would come in action by approved action item in the next couple weeks. So I'd like to post for these positions. Again, about $1,500. We have the money within the budget.
What is Tara's job right now?
No, she's just a full-time teacher.
She's a teacher.
She came.
Okay.
She was on sabbatical. No, she was on leave.
Leave, yeah.
Not sabbatical. The other, thank you. And also, we have some funds left in the GROW grant, and we would like to utilize the funds grant, what we talked about last year. Becky Forrestal has rewritten the job description and is trying to use some money from our GROW grant to create a family liaison position to connect some of the families I spoke about earlier with resources. It's grant funded, but again, if you guys ever see a posting for a family liaison position, what the heck is Steve doing? I'd like to have you guys hear it first. Liaison. So that will be enacted, but again, that's grant money, and that's a 6-month position. We can post it that way. The other position is middle school Nordic. I gave a preview of this 2 weeks ago. It is a great problem to have. Having more students, having 40 students who want to do the middle school Nordic program is a great thing. Philosophically, in the middle school and high school, we typically like to offer one uncut program each season. If right now our athletic director and building principal has said to me it is not safe for one coach to work with 40 kids in this genre. So our choice is either to reduce participation or to hire or post for and see if we can hire an assistant Nordic coach. We have done this in the past. If enrollment requires it, we have added a position. It comes somewhere from in the Schedule B if we have unfunded positions or somewhere in unexpended funds. It would be about a 1,500. Again, this is a contract. This is a CBA-driven position, so it's about a 1,500 component. That's my recommendation is not to cut and prevent kids, but it is to provide more supervision. Again, this will be enacted if we get somebody, but I just want to give a heads up. And because of the timing, I think I posted this as anticipated, but I did talk about last week. I didn't like lie or anything. And then I'm excited for Dan, sad for us.
And it says instructional assistant before that?
What's that one?
The opening that we have at Maple Street.
Gordon. I didn't do Gordon yet?
No.
I thought I did Gordon 2
You're
weeks
getting
ago.
right to it. You're getting right to it.
Wow. I thought we already said Gordon was, must have been right the day before last meeting. Gordon Mcdonald, which is one of our former graduates, comes forward as instructional assistant position. Gordy?
Really?
Yeah, he's
No
going to work
kidding.
with us.
But
I
he likes-
apologize.
he likes
I thought I
Gordon
did
now.
this already.
Oh, all
I
right.
want to call him Gordy.
All right.
Don't
Yeah.
call Gordy.
I asked him.
No,
It's not in second grade anymore.
I know.
I've interviewed him for a sub position. I've interviewed him for an IA position. This is in his field, chosen field. It's a wonderful addition. We work with Amy. Amy's very excited. Was honestly one of the best interviews I've had for this position. Has a great spirit, great heart, and great desire. So I apologize. I thought I already did Gordy. It's been a long day. And the last one, Dan Forrester, is resigning. And I'm happy for him. He got a teaching degree and got a teaching position. So he's moving from an instructional assistant to a case manager position at Hillsborough Deering, sometimes known as Hop West, because we have about 3 or 4 former Hopkinton teachers, IAs, who went over there to become it. That's what they do. Happy for him, but his resignation is there.
Great. And those are action items. Everybody's okay with those last 2 as action items for tonight? Okay. Excellent.
Monthly financial?
Sure, in the packet, and now I can speak with a voice, so you can actually hear me.
Working.
Thank you, I've missed it myself.
Magic of fresco.
Yeah, not much different than the month before. We're still in the early part, being that it's only October 31st by when this financial was done, and we started July 1st. So there's a lot of things that have been captured as additional expenses that were not known yet, but just based on what kind of our past history is or the exposure we have, i.e. like teacher classes or just little things like that.
We did it today, and I said.
We're
not to do
just
it.
about at 300,000, which is a little bit less than last month. Couple things to remember to point out again, is that there's things that we didn't have in the budget last year due to children moving in and/or children changing in their demographics. So that has put some pressure on the budget. And we knew about this because it happened after the budget was done last year.
Right.
But I just like to kind of,
Thank you.
I don't want to necessarily put it in, it kind of alludes to it, but that can make a big difference. And when you have it happen after you're already in a budget process, it's difficult because it takes 2 years to get caught up.
And that was a question the budget committee had last night about that line, but.
Yeah, that's what happens, unfortunately. Because we already knew there was no way we could add even more to the budget last year when these things were happening, which was like sometime in December, and one was, I think, in the beginning of the year, even like January or February.
Was it last year we did put $1 in the special ed trust and we withdrew it at the
We
end?
did withdraw it at the end, yeah.
So we've tried to plan for it, but it wasn't the meeting to ask for it anymore.
Right,
Funds.
exactly.
Remember that?
The other financial piece, I'll just tack into it, is the budget transfer. So because this is above the dollar amount that we have for a line transfer, it's within the same category. It's just 110 is not where we keep our sub-budgets and where that we charge them to. But the system last year charged it to a 110. Again, it's the same location. It's in a salary line. It's just a formality more than nothing at all. Because the subs are getting charged to a 120 and there's no budget there right now.
Got it. So it's putting the sub in the right spot. Questions for Michelle regarding the budget transfer, which is an action item tonight? All right, I think.
So just that reclass is the only
Yeah.
thing that we need to
Right.
take note of, okay. Awesome.
And 2 donations, PTA, thank you so much for Mrs. Fallensby's third grade field trip to the Sea Science Center. Yahoo! Love the Sea Science Center. And I think it's the second time former Hopkinton High School graduate, former student rep to the board, donated $500 for the support the robotics program. Nick Mayo.
That's awesome.
That's awesome. I think it's the second time. Does that
Yes,
sound familiar
you
to
are
you guys?
right.
It's great.
He's known as Mr. Safety.
Yeah. It's great that Nick's doing that.
That's awesome, yeah.
Sam, so after you leave, you're going to donate? I'm just kidding.
You
Just
didn't know
kidding.
that when you accepted the position, did you?
Just kidding.
Yeah,
That's all I got.
great, thank you. At this point, we have one more opportunity for public comment. If either of you have anything to add at this moment, you may.
Thanks for sticking it out.
You may provide some comment.
Couple things.
Only because that's going into the, I think that, right, Matt, that's going into the.
That's portable for you, just
Yeah.
wanna take
You
it back
just
to your
wanna
seat.
take the
Yeah, if you
microphone
wanna
with you.
sit.
Okay, okay.
It's been a long.
It's just the streaming piece.
So I want to know if I understand correctly that there is a lot of other meetings happened before 2018, that there are meeting minutes available.
Are they public? They're in on a website. That website, I don't think is public. I can talk with Dave and Jay about
I
that.
looked
though.
high and low. I couldn't find, all
Yes.
I could find was the ones that you
Right.
recently put up after our emails.
Yes, I can. I will talk with Dave and Jay, make sure it's okay with them, and I can make sure they're public. Yep, we have
Because
minutes.
based on the things that you said and people talked about, and the woman who sat in front of me said that some of that may clarify and inform people.
And other
because some of it
reports.
carries. I mean, I was-
Happy to look into
Yeah.
that.
I'm just gonna hold it, it's gonna fall down. I'm, because I don't know, everything I've read, I can't find out. I'm assuming that when we changed from lower enrollment to higher enrollment, that the whole project changed, but I could hear some discussions about some of the plans and the costs are still relevant from the initial work. Okay, I'd like to see that, so.
Sure. That's the one.
Okay.
Make sure it's okay with Jay.
The other question is for David, is with the change in what's happening in Concord, is anything on the books to change anything about SPED funding at the state level? Because I'm not up to date on it, but I did live in a community prior to living in Hopkinton who did a lot of what Hopkinton's done, which is really embrace and make sure that they are doing the best for special education students. And what happened is lots of special ed kids moved into town, and it just made them transient, and then the town gets very burdened with that cost as the state's not supplementing anymore. And I just see that as like a recurring problem as people move to communities and then the communities become burdened with higher tax rates. Is there anything on the books for
Right, so let me,
changing it?
yeah, let me try to answer that in more of a larger context, because there's a lot of discussion going on right now about education funding. And a commission just wrapped up, just issued a report. I just received it this morning, and I haven't had a chance to go through it yet. But I mean, I went through it quickly. I think the commission's report falls woefully short on what the state should be doing really across all aspects of public education, which is funding adequacy, funding building aid, and funding special education support. And it does address those components, but there's going to be several pieces of legislation filed before the end of this month to substantially improve each of those, is my understanding. But commensurate with those have to come other pieces of legislation on the revenue side. And so this is going to be a very integrated, I guess, concert of work between Ways and Means, Education, and Finance, both in the House and the Senate, and then to get the governor to go along with those policies. So yes, that is something that is front and center.
Well, I'll be looking forward to, I know the other things are important. I just was very experienced with the special ed where I lived before. And it was interesting because my husband said, I taught Sunday school, I had scouts, everything. My husband said, per capita, are there this many, special ed kids in the world? I said, no, we're a magnet community. People were literally moving one town over to get the special ed that Wyndham was really pushing and really fostering. And I see that happening here. I mean, I think we try to do the right thing by education, and sometimes you get a little bit of backlash of the cost, and I'm just hoping to see the state step in so that, to help the community, but also a lot of families become transient. They're running around trying to find the next place to go with their children.
Right.
So,
Right. No, thank you, Diane.
thank you.
All set? Good, thank you, and thank you for being here.
You stuck it out.
Hang it in there. All right, we will move on to action items. I'll take a motion for the Hopkinton School Board to approve the superintendent's nomination of Gordon Mcdonald, instructional assistant on Maple Street School, pending final approval of the superintendent of schools.
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Take a motion for the Hopkinton School Board to accept I'll take a motion for the Hopkinton School Board to approve the superintendent's recommendation to accept Hopkinton High School instructional assistant Dan Forrester's resignation effective Friday, November 23rd, 2018.
So moved.
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
With regrets on that.
Yes. Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Take a motion for the Hopkinton School Board to accept the superintendent's recommendation to approve a budget transfer 2019-01 to reallocate substitute funds.
So moved.
Second, and just I have a question.
Sure.
Which is just, what's the dollar amount to that?
It's on the,
It's right on the
Yeah, okay.
bottom.
That's on the transfer.
So I'll put it in next time.
Oh, no, it's okay, I couldn't find it.
So, should be this total transfer,
Oh, that's-
53,648.24.
Okay, that's great, thank you.
all in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Take a motion for the Hopkinton School Board to approve the superintendent's recommendation to accept a $500 donation from Hopkinton PTA to support Ms. Follensby's third grade field trip to Sea Science Center.
So moved.
It's actually the third grade.
Isn't that what I said?
It is third grade.
Well, not just Ms.
Not
Follins,
just Ms. Follansby.
but she must have
Oh,
put in the
for-
request.
Yes,
Oh,
she is.
okay.
She was the
Third grade
spokesperson.
field trip to Sea Science Center.
So moved.
Second.
Give her top
Any
billing.
further discussion?
Yeah.
All in favor?
Aye.
And I hope the entire third grade enjoys the
They
trip.
will enjoy it.
I'll take a motion for the Hopkinton School Board to approve the superintendent's recommendation to accept a $500 donation from Nicholas Mayo to support HMHS Robotics Club.
So moved.
Second.
Any further discussion? And a huge thank you to Nick. I think that's fantastic. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. 2017 or 18 graduate. 17 graduate. Yep. Any need for a non-public session this evening?
Yes, please.
Yes, please. Right, I'll take a motion to hold a non-public session for the discussion of matters as per RSA 91-A:3, Roman numeral 2, small letter A, for matters of personnel and negotiations.
Yes, so, yeah, I'm a yes.
Yes.
And yes. Regular meeting adjourned at 8:18.
So who moved it?